Hey guys, tonight we begin with a kingdom built on sand, salt, and so much gold it made Cairo's bankers faint. We're going to walk, barefoot as usual, through the life of a man who became the wealthiest emperor in human history, and still somehow kept his robes free of camel spit. You're in 14th century West Africa now, in the heart of the Mali Empire. The air smells of wood smoke and dust. Gold flecks sparkle in the riverbeds. And somewhere, a griot, an oral historian, is tuning his instrument and preparing to tell your story. But don't worry, you won't have to remember any dates, or names, or even where you left your sandals. You just have to drift with the story. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's listening from where. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up somewhere near the edge of the Sahel, probably in the late 1280s or early 1290s, though your calendar is mostly palm frond gossip and goat tracks in the sand. Mali isn't just a place. It's a rhythm, a low hum of markets, riverboats, and hummingbirds. You're born into a world where gold is so common, it dusts your toes after a walk through the stream bank. No one's particularly impressed. Even the toddlers play with nuggets. What's actually rare? A good rain. You live in Nyani, or maybe one of the smaller cities. Kangaba, perhaps. Your family is noble, probably. Historians still argue whether you're the nephew or cousin of the sitting emperor, Mansa II. Either way, you're royal adjacent, close enough to smell the power, not close enough to borrow the royal horses. Your home is earthen, cool and round, walls smoothed with river mud, shaded by wooden beams and carefully thatched roofs. Inside, everything smells like roasted grain, palm oil, and old prayer mats. You sleep on mats, eat from communal bowls, and learn early that every spoken word might live longer than you do. So you listen first, then speak. Mali is an empire now, not a kingdom. It sprawls across savannas and deserts, up to the Senegal River, and down to the forested edges of what we'd now call Guinea. Its veins are trade routes. Camel caravans haul salt south, gold north, and stories in every direction. You grow up watching these caravans come and go, with their slow loping camels and their long shadows stretching like ancient timelines across the sand. By age 10, you know how to find your way by the sun, barter in 2 languages, and avoid being volunteered for water hauling duty. You've also learned that wealth here isn't just gold. It's also stories, books, prayers, and knowing the right proverb at the right moment. And mangoes. Mangoes are always a form of power. Education in Mali isn't confined to dusty scrolls in forgotten corners. Yes, the empire will eventually become a hub of Islamic scholarship. But right now, your classroom is a griot. He's old, impossibly wrinkled, and smells like incense and dry ink. He can recite the names of your ancestors back 15 generations on your mother's side. You try not to fidget while he talks about Sundiata, the Lion King of Mali. Not the Disney one, the original one, whose story is half myth, half muscle, and entirely unforgettable. The empire's currency isn't minted coins, it's cowrie shells, slabs of salt, and trust. A deal made under a baobab tree is binding. Your word matters. So does your tone, and whether you remembered to greet your auntie properly before speaking. Spoiler, you didn't. She's still mad. She'll forgive you tomorrow. Your childhood rolls by like a slow cart on a dusty path, rich with rhythm, scented with spice, tangled in laughter and chores. You're not a prince in a crystal tower. You're the quiet one at the feast, watching, learning, dreaming of deserts and libraries, not knowing that someday the entire known world will know your name, or mispronounce it. But we'll get to that. You'll become Mansa Musa. But for now, you're just Musa, which is already enough. Historians still argue whether you were destined for the throne or just happened to be the one person nearby when a very ambitious emperor vanished into the Atlantic with too many boats. But that's later. For now, your biggest problem is a sandstorm approaching, a missing goat, and figuring out how not to step in donkey droppings on the way to the mosque. Also, you're not entirely sure what gold is actually good for. It's heavy, shiny, and everyone acts weird about it. But you can't eat it. You can't write on it. And no matter how hard you try, you can't skip it across the river like a rock. So, you mostly ignore it. After all, gold is everywhere. You're older now, maybe 17, maybe 20. No one's really keeping track unless you owe taxes or are eligible for marriage negotiations, which, coincidentally, often happen on the same day. You've outgrown the sand-sifting, goat-chasing part of youth and are now in that awkward noble phase where people expect you to know things like border disputes and camel inventory charts, even if you'd rather be anywhere else. You still live in the empire of Mali, and by now, you've seen how wide it stretches. Traders from the Maghreb, from Egypt, even from the far edge of Andalusia, come bearing things you can't pronounce and scrolls that smell like centuries. You meet men who've seen oceans, climbed mountains, and, most importantly, speak in Arabic so formal it makes even the imam raise an eyebrow. You're learning to walk like a man of the court. Steady, slow, chin up, but not too high. You don't want to look arrogant. That's reserved for the tax collectors. You're also learning diplomacy, which mostly means listening for 8 hours and nodding occasionally while hiding your real opinion behind a neutral mango face. At this point, you're something of a mystery. You're royal blood, sure, but not a crown prince. More like crown adjacent. You're respected, occasionally bowed to, and regularly invited to public events where you're seated just far enough from the main table to be noticed, but not too close to be threatening. Your uncle, or possibly cousin, Abubakari II, is emperor now, and he's eccentric. Let's go with that. He's fascinated with the ocean, obsessed. He spends long nights on the river docks, staring at the horizon like it owes him money. He gathers boat makers, sailors, astrologers, cooks, griots, and camel guides. No one knows why the camel guides are there, and announces he's going to sail across the Atlantic Ocean to see what's out there. Historians still argue about this, by the way. Some say Abubakar II never really left. Others insist he launched a fleet of hundreds of ships, vanished beyond the horizon, and either found the Americas or was promptly eaten by them. There's no firm evidence, just a lot of oral tradition and a suspiciously empty throne. So when the emperor sails off into the blue, everyone turns and looks at you. Well, not everyone. Some pretend to look at mangoes. But the message is clear. You're next. And just like that, you become Mansa. There's no royal fanfare, no epic speech, no fireworks. Someone hands you a robe. Someone else mutters a prayer. You sit on the lion skin cushion and try not to look like you've just swallowed a hornet. Congratulations. You now rule the Mali Empire, an empire that controls half the gold in the known world, stretches across rivers, deserts, and mountain edges, and includes people who speak over 20 languages, none of which agree on how to say Your Majesty properly. Your first problem is sandals. Well, not literally, but you quickly realize that the symbolism of leadership in Mali often boils down to very specific and uncomfortable footwear. Sandals mean status, but not too new. Then you look like you're trying too hard. Not too worn. Then you look poor. Also, they must squeak just enough to announce you, but not so much that it sounds like you're being followed by frogs. Next, you deal with tribute. Everyone wants to give you things. Herds of goats, piles of millet, sacks of cola nuts. One man brings a live hyena on a leash. You're not sure if it's a gift or a threat, so you accept it politely and hand it off to your most nervous advisor. Then there's gold. So much gold. It fills baskets, bowls, ceremonial spoons. You get gold jewelry, gold weapons, gold-threaded robes, gold-laced turbans. You try to act impressed every time, but honestly, it's starting to feel like people are overcompensating. You're Mansa Musa now, Emperor of Emperors, Lord of the Rivers and Sand, which means that your signature takes 3 lines to write, and your meetings never end on time. You're not just a ruler. You're a symbol, a face, a whisper on the trade routes. The griots begin adjusting your title in their stories. They don't call you Musa. They call you the man who sits like granite, but dreams like water. You're flattered. You're also slightly concerned, because that could mean anything. And here's the twist. You actually like ruling. Not the pageantry, or the endless robe fittings, or the formal banquets where you have to act interested in someone describing 17 types of desert beetles. But the real work, the markets, the learning, the negotiations, the slow building of something lasting, that part sings to you. You decide to make a mark, not with war, but with wonder. You want Mali to be more than gold. You want it to be remembered, written about, whispered over by scholars who wear ink stains like medals. You want to go to Mecca. The pilgrimage, Hajj, is something all Muslims aspire to, if they're able. You are very able, but you're not interested in slipping quietly across the dunes with a handful of companions and a date-stuffed travel pouch. Oh no. You're planning a parade across the entire Sahara. You're not a subtle man, or rather, you are, when necessary. But for this journey, this pilgrimage across continents to the holy city of Mecca, subtlety is the one thing you leave behind in Niani, along with your favorite cushion and half your patience. Because here's the thing. If you're Mansa Musa, ruler of Mali, you don't just go to Mecca. You make an entrance, a continental one. The Hajj is a sacred obligation, yes, but for you, it's also a statement. A moving, sand-dusted, gold-dripping, camel-heavy declaration that Mali isn't just a place, it's a presence, and it's arriving. You don't travel with a few camels. You travel with tens of thousands of people. Yes, you read that right. Tens of thousands. Servants, soldiers, imams, judges, scholars, cooks, griots, even a few bored teenagers who snuck into the caravan just to say they did. You bring 100 camels, each loaded with gold. Some say hundreds of pounds each. And then you pack more gold just in case the first gold gets dusty. You also bring horses, goats, and bundles of silk robes that rustle like the wings of overfed pigeons. This isn't a journey. It's a slow-motion miracle. You wear white, of course, pure and pilgrim-like. But the fabric is woven so fine, it shimmers like sunlight trapped in cotton. Your entourage includes musicians who play while walking, servants who sweep the road ahead of you, and attendants who ensure your drinking water is not merely clean. It's been scented with orange blossom. You are nothing if not hydrated and fragrant. As you cross the Sahara, towns empty just to see you pass. Nomads drop their trading posts to follow at a distance. Kids name their goats Musa and hope for a coin. By the time you reach Egypt, you're a legend. A whisper turned into a wave. You arrive in Cairo in 1324. The Mamluk Sultan al-Nasir is curious but wary. You're not an official rival, but you're large. Your caravan stretches so far, it arrives in shifts. One witness later says your procession caused the entire city to buzz like a hive struck with a stick. You meet the Sultan's officials. They invite you to bow. You politely decline. You bow only to God. This causes a diplomatic breeze to stir through the court. Cool, tense, possibly citrus-scented. Eventually, you meet the Sultan himself. It's respectful, formal, full of those awkward pauses where both sides wait for the other to blink first. You offer gold, not a pouch, not a plate. You offer entire rooms of gold. You tip merchants, street vendors, even the man who pointed you to the bathhouse. You give away gold like it's going out of fashion. Which, temporarily, it does. Historians still argue whether you intended to crash Cairo's economy. But crash it, you did. Gold floods the market. Prices skyrocket. Then plummet. Then spiral like confused pigeons. Inflation spreads like a gossiping fire. Cairo's economy doesn't recover for over a decade. Your generosity becomes the most expensive good deed in medieval history. And yet, you're still loved, because your pilgrimage isn't all golden chaos. It's also faith, reverence. You pray at every mosque along the way. You give to the poor, not just coin, but food, shelter, shoes, water. You kneel like everyone else on the prayer mat, even if your mat is noticeably plush. You spend time with scholars. You debate theology, astronomy, literature. You meet poets who recite entire epics from memory, and scribes who write so fast their hands blur like hummingbirds. You invite them to Mali. Many say yes. You purchase books. You sponsor mosque repairs. You commission copies of the Quran written so beautifully that the ink smells like jasmine and the pages practically sing. You leave a trail of stunned witnesses in your wake. One merchant in Damascus later claims your caravan passed by for 3 straight days. Another says you gave away so much gold that local thieves had to switch to stealing fruit, just to be original. And yet, somehow, it all feels grounded. As if this is exactly how your story was meant to unfold. As if you're not flaunting power, but using it the way a river uses its banks, to shape, to carry, to nourish. On the way back, you take your time. You stop in Cairo again, partly to apologize, with more gold, of course, partly to recruit more talent for your court. You buy manuscripts, architectural blueprints, and musical instruments. You bring back an architect named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. He'll change the skyline of West Africa. You pass through cities that now recognize your name before your caravan even appears on the horizon. And after months of heat, sand, and camels with questionable attitudes, you return to Mali. You left a ruler. You return a legend. You ride back into Mali, not just as an emperor, but as living myth. Your pilgrimage has echoed across deserts, river valleys, even the Mediterranean. You've become that tale griots rush to memorize before someone else does it first. And the best part? You're still alive to hear it. The people greet you with joy, awe, and in some villages, sheer disbelief. Children hang from mango trees to catch a glimpse. Merchants bring gold-threaded cloths, hoping you'll bless them. One man offers you a monkey dressed in miniature royal robes. You pretend not to notice. You return with more than gold. You bring books bound in soft leather, scholars who smell faintly of old ink and dried herbs, architects with scrolls bursting from their sleeves, and ideas. So many ideas. Historians agree on this part. Your pilgrimage marks a shift. Mali starts to shimmer differently. Before, it was gold and power. Now, it's becoming a place of knowledge, of culture. You're no longer content with wealth. You want legacy. You want light. And so, you begin to build. Your first focus, Timbuktu. Now, let's clear something up. You didn't found Timbuktu. It had been around, doing just fine as a trade hub and modest settlement. But under your guidance and your very deep pockets, it transforms. You invest in it, like a modern city planner, with a very relaxed concept of budgeting. You fund the building of madrasas, Islamic schools, where students chant under acacia trees and discuss philosophy between goat sightings. You restore mosques and construct new ones. Most famously, you commission the Panta Jingwerebur Mosque, designed by Al-Sahili, your Andalusian architect friend, with very strong opinions about symmetry. The mosque isn't built from stone or marble. No. This is the Sahel. It's built from mud. Well, adobe, technically. Sun-dried bricks made of sand, straw, and clay. And yet, it's majestic, towering, regal in its simplicity. Every year, the people replaster it in a community-wide ritual that becomes part civic duty, part muddy festival. Kids help. Elders direct. Tourists, centuries later, stare. But you're not done. You commission new learning centers, known as madrasas, filled with scrolls, books, and men who speak 7 languages but still can't agree on the phases of the moon. You build libraries, where manuscripts sleep like ancient cats, curled in baskets and bundles, waiting to be read aloud. Historians still debate how many manuscripts were collected. Some say 100,000. Others argue that's exaggerated. But regardless of the number, one thing is clear. Mali becomes the intellectual heart of West Africa. And Timbuktu? It becomes something whispered across the Islamic world. Not as a joke or metaphor, but as a real, vibrant city where knowledge walks the dusty streets in bare feet. You sponsor scholars who debate law, astronomy, medicine, ethics. Some recite the Quran entirely from memory, backward, just to prove a point. You host public forums where people argue about whether fish have souls and whether salt is technically a spice. You find it all endlessly entertaining. And not just entertaining, powerful. Knowledge, you realize, is another kind of wealth. It doesn't weigh anything. It can't be stolen as easily. And when shared, it multiplies instead of disappearing. So you invest. You pay teachers as well as soldiers. You fund translation projects. You encourage travel. You even create safe routes and rest stops for scholars migrating between regions. You're building not just roads and walls, but a network of minds. You also make some fashion upgrades. Post-Hajj, Musa favors robes of white and indigo, trimmed with embroidery, so fine it makes visiting dignitaries question their self-worth. You wear a turban that could double as a decorative tent. Your gold jewelry has toned down slightly, not because you lack it, but because you've decided your words should be what glitter now. You continue attending Friday prayers, walking barefoot as tradition demands, despite offers to carry you on silk cushions. You still fast. You still listen to the griots. And when they sing of you, Musa the Magnificent, the builder of Timbuktu, the man who made gold boring, you smile softly. But here's a strange thing. The more you give, the more people seem to want from you. Every week brings new visitors. Some seek money, others justice. Some just want to see your beard. You meet them all, patiently, calmly, usually with a bowl of dates nearby. it becomes part of your rhythm. And still, you build. In Niani, your capital, you begin expanding the palace grounds. You plant trees imported from far lands. You create shaded corridors where ministers can stroll while arguing about tariffs. You commission fountains that whisper instead of roar. And everywhere, books. Books on shelves, in chests, under cushions. You want every child in Mali to grow up knowing that knowledge is not just for the rich. It's for the curious. Mali is changing. Not rapidly, not chaotically, but steadily. Like water soaking into earth. Gold no longer dazzles you. You've seen it pile up, spill over, even cause market crashes. But the sight of a child reading her first manuscript, that still gets you. It's early morning in Niani, and the air smells like millet porridge, damp clay, and something just barely sweet. Maybe date syrup. Maybe the trees are in bloom again. You step outside, sandals tucked under one arm, and the entire capital seems to be waiting for you to exhale. Being emperor means your schedule isn't really yours anymore. It belongs to the empire. And Mali is vast, sprawling over 1,000 miles across deserts, rivers, forests, and more than 400 cities, each with its own complaints, dreams, and preferred varieties of goat. You hold court every Monday, a tradition that began long before you and will continue long after. But with you, it's grown into something oddly theatrical. Picture it. You, seated under a tall awning, flanked by advisors, with scribes sitting cross-legged in the dust. Petitioners line up beneath the shade of baobab trees, holding small tokens of respect. Dates, cloth, occasionally a chicken. One man once brought you a perfectly round pebble. You kept it on your desk for weeks, just because it made people nervous. This is where the empire breathes. One complaint at a time, one trade deal, one land dispute, one overdramatic poet insisting that someone stole the rhythm of his verse. And you listen. That's your quiet power. You listen, not just to the words, but the tone, the silences, the bits people don't say out loud. You ask questions no one expects. You remember names. You send gifts before anyone asks. Sometimes, just showing up is diplomacy. Historians still argue about your administrative structure. Some say you micromanaged. Others say you ruled by delegation, letting the local chiefs handle most daily affairs while you focused on the bigger picture, taxation, diplomacy, and deciding which parts of Timbuktu needed another library. The truth is probably somewhere in between. You're not omnipresent, but you're very well informed. You maintain a small army of messengers who can ride 100 miles in 2 days, and whose horses have better names than some royal nephews. Your empire runs on more than muscle. It runs on salt, too. Salt is your other gold, only useful. It's traded in slabs, carried on camelback across blistering deserts, and measured with almost sacred respect. In some cities, salt is currency. In others, it's medicine. Everyone needs it. No one ever has enough. You ensure the salt routes are safe. You strike deals with Tuareg nomads, offering protection and trade rights in exchange for information and loyalty. You keep the trade flowing. Gold north, salt south, stories in every direction. And stories? You know their power. You sponsor griots, oral historians whose voices carry the empire's memory. They sing of your generosity, yes, but they also sing of justice and ancestors and old wars settled by riddles instead of blood. You make sure every village has one, not because you need flattery, but because an empire that forgets its past soon forgets how to walk. You also quietly invest in things no one else thinks about. Granaries, wells, shade trees near market stalls. You know the value of comfort, of preparation. You once funded the construction of covered walkways in a particularly rainy province, not because anyone asked, but because you remembered someone mentioning how hard it was to sell cloth in the rain. That kind of memory, it's your real superpower. Still, even emperors need a break. Sometimes, after court ends, you walk the gardens alone, barefoot, of course. The paths are swept clean for you, but you prefer the feel of warm dirt under your toes. It reminds you you're still human, still Musa. On one of these walks, a child once handed you a note, carefully folded, written in charcoal. It read, "When will the stars run out of light?" You didn't answer right away. You just smiled. Later that night, you summoned your court astronomer. Turns out, he didn't know either. That same child grew up to be a scholar in Timbuktu. You funded her first manuscripts. That's the sort of ruler you are. You see people not just for who they are, but who they might become. A trader becomes a diplomat. A fisherman becomes a city planner. A loud-mouthed teenager becomes the best legal scribe in the southern provinces. You believe in transformation, in possibility. And yet, even gold-touched empires have shadows. The bigger Mali gets, the harder it is to hold. Distant provinces bicker. Some borderlands grumble about taxes. A few governors get too comfortable, too greedy. You receive reports of one town where the tax collector literally tried to charge for moonlight. You send a replacement and a strongly worded poem, but the problems remain. You can't be everywhere. That's when you start leaning harder on your advisors. You gather a group of men and women. Yes, women. Known for their sharp minds and sharper tongues, they meet weekly. They debate furiously. They occasionally throw fruit. You encourage it. Better a bruised melon than a bruised empire. Still, the pressure grows. Ruling is heavy, even for someone used to carrying the weight of golden generosity. Your pilgrimage may be over, but the journey? It never really stops. It's midday now, and the air has gone still, hot enough to make the shadows shimmer. Somewhere in the distance, someone is pounding millet in rhythm, a soft thump, thump that seems to match your pulse. You sit beneath a wide awning, robes loose, face shaded by a carved wooden screen. In front of you, ledgers, tall, unwieldy, full of numbers, scribbles, and doodles you suspect are the work of that one bored accountant who insists his name is the Quill. The numbers are dizzying. Grain stores, gold shipments, salt quotas, trade routes. You try to focus, but the page smells like goat ink and regret. Still, you read, because these lines represent people, hundreds of thousands of them. Farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, poets, camel drivers, children, griots, all of them living under your rule. All of them, in a way, depending on you to get this part right. Mali is big, unreasonably big. Think if you dropped your ring in the northern region, it would take 3 weeks to find kind of big. From the Atlantic coast in the west to the edge of Lake Chad in the east, it stretches farther than the eye and the donkey can see. And you govern it all. Not alone, of course. You've built a bureaucracy that is both maddeningly complex and surprisingly effective. Provincial governors known as farbus run the local courts and collect taxes. You appoint them carefully, based on loyalty, competence, and in one unusual case, their talent for reciting poetry under pressure. Your scribes work in shifts, recording everything from criminal complaints to marriage contracts to how many fish passed through a single market in a single week. No one really needs that fish number, but it looks impressive in reports. Historians still argue about just how centralized your empire truly was. Some insist you had your hands in everything, like a culinary monarch stirring the entire empire pot. Others say local autonomy thrived under your watch, and you simply set the tone. Calm, firm, gold-trimmed. Either way, the system works. Mostly. You've even started standardizing weights and measures, which, while not particularly exciting to most people, has revolutionized trade. No more arguing over whether 1 handful of pepper equals 3 goat teeth. Now, it's measured in small brass cubes engraved with tiny birds. People love the birds. And the markets? Oh, the markets. You make regular visits, not in full regalia, just simple robes. Maybe a walking stick. Maybe a trusted advisor or two trailing behind, trying to look casual. The vendors know you, but they pretend not to. It's part of the game. You browse. You ask questions. You inspect papayas, compliment fabric, listen to gossip disguised as greetings. This is where you hear the truth. It drifts from basket to ear, wrapped in riddles and metaphors. The millet is slow to rise this year, someone might say, which really means the tax collector in District 9 is hoarding grain again. You send someone to look into it, quietly. You're careful not to let paranoia seep in. You've seen what happens to rulers who suspect everyone. They end up surrounded by silence, flinching at shadows, sleeping with one eye open and one sandal on. You don't want that. Instead, you lean on transparency. You hold open forums. People can petition you directly, provided they're willing to stand in the sun long enough and say, "Oh Mansa," 3 times with proper tone. Some people get very creative with the tone. You respect that. But with all this order, all this structure, comes a strange kind of exhaustion. You start to notice it in little ways. A weariness behind your eyes. A sigh that takes a little too long to exhale. The way your dreams blur. Scrolls, camels, endless lines of figures that turn into rivers, then roads, then snakes with golden tongues. Sometimes you wonder if being emperor means slowly vanishing into the machinery of empire itself. But then something happens to snap you back. A griot arrives from the southern provinces. He's young, nervous, with a voice like cracked honey. He sings a new tale, not of you, but of a village healer who cured a king's insomnia by whispering stories into bowls of warm milk. You don't understand the story entirely, but something in the way he tells it, soft, steady, rhythmic, reminds you why you rule. Because storytelling is ruling, in a way. You shape the narrative. You decide what gets remembered, what gets passed on, what becomes legacy. And so, you do something unusual. You commission a new story, not about you, but about the empire. Not a brag, not a list of victories, but a slow, detailed account of daily life in Mali. The river fishers, the women who brew shea butter, the men who carve drums, the children who race shadows across courtyards. You want future generations to know that greatness doesn't always look like gold. Sometimes it looks like goat's milk over a quiet fire, or a mother brushing her child's hair while reciting verses about stars. This is how you stay human. Not in the parades, not in the decrees, but in the quiet noticing of how your people live. And though you don't say it out loud, you start to understand something else. Maybe, just maybe, making gold boring isn't a curse. Maybe it's a gift. It's late afternoon, and the sun is mellowing into that syrupy gold that spills across rooftops and turns even the dust into something poetic. You're sitting beneath a tall acacia tree, the shade laced with dapples of light, listening to a scholar argue with a merchant about whether the moon has seasons. You're not moderating. You're just present. That's often enough. Because now you've reached a strange point in your reign where your mere presence is a sort of gravity. People orbit you with cautious admiration, respectful jokes, and the occasional mango. And the empire? It runs. Sometimes like a graceful river, sometimes like a goat on stilts. But it runs. You begin to notice something unexpected creeping into your days. Stillness. Not boredom, not yet, but stillness, a lack of urgency, fewer fires to put out, fewer border scuffles to mediate. Your governors have learned to govern. Your scribes have developed something dangerously close to a filing system. Your roads are watched. Your cities are humming. And that humming, it sounds suspiciously like contentment. So you begin to turn your gaze inward. You spend more time in Timbuktu, which has become something like a desert jewel. Students come from across Africa and beyond to study there, some dusty from days on the road, others arriving with trunks of books, grandmothers, and perfectly starched robes. They bring questions, big ones. Are numbers infinite? Can a soul be divided? Why do we dream? You sit in on lectures, sometimes disguised in plain robes, letting the scholars argue around you like birds in a fig tree. One of them says that each grain of sand contains 1,000 stories. You like that? You commission her to write a treatise, which she does using ink made from date syrup and soot. Historians still argue whether your personal interest in scholarship was genuine or politically savvy. Maybe it was both. But what matters is this: you gave knowledge weight. You made books heavier than swords. Your personal library expands, not just in Niani, but across your various homes. You collect texts in Arabic, Songhai, Mandinka, even a few translated from Sanskrit by wandering monks with eyebrows that point due north. Some texts you can read. Others you just like to touch. The scrolls feel like they've stored sunlight. At night, you read by lamplight, the oil burning low and steady, the pages whispering like palm fronds in wind. You're not seeking anything grand, just understanding. The feeling of learning something new after years of being the one everyone turns to for answers. That feeling is better than gold. And gold? You almost forget about it. Not completely, of course. It's still your currency, your symbol, your burden. But it no longer excites you. You've seen too much of it. Piled in storerooms, glinting in the sand, glued to ceremonial robes that itch. The shine is gone. You once told a visiting merchant that gold was just the shadow of trust. He stared at you like you'd spoken in riddles. Maybe you had. You start giving more away, quietly, systematically. You fund schools. You endow scholarships. You sponsor traders who bring back rare herbs and stranger stories. You offer small fortunes to musicians who invent new instruments. One man brings you a flute carved from the leg bone of a lion. You pay him triple and ask him never to play it indoors. Still, even in this phase of soft reflection, challenges persist. You hear rumors of unrest along the southern trade routes. One governor has grown arrogant. Another accuses him of hoarding grain. There's talk of bribery, of soldiers accepting gifts from passing caravans and turning a blind eye to smuggling. You don't overreact. You send letters, clever ones, laced with proverbs. You send an envoy, and then another. Eventually, things settle, but you notice the cracks. Empires don't break all at once. They thin at the edges, quietly. You mark this. You file it away. Because part of you wonders if this is what legacy really means. Not the grand triumphs, but the quiet, course corrections that prevent the unraveling. And so, you start working more closely with your sons. They're trying. Your eldest is intelligent, devout, serious, but also rigid, like a scroll that's never been opened. The younger ones have spirit, charm, and an alarming tendency to skip meetings. You mentor them slowly. You take them on regional tours. Let them hear the complaints, smell the markets, feel the dust. You want them to rule with hands, calloused by experience, not just wrapped in silk. You let them fail, safely. A mismanaged water project, a poorly judged land dispute. You correct gently, firmly. You let them taste what power really is. Not command, but service. And through it all, the empire persists. The caravans continue. The griots sing. The gold mines breathe their dusty breath. The cities glow in the dusk. Your people still greet the moon with songs. You sit, watching the horizon. You think, maybe this is what peace feels like. A little still, a little strange, but entirely golden. The dry season returns with its usual flair. Red winds sweeping over courtyards, the scent of warm sand clinging to every surface, and that particular crunch of dryness beneath your sandals that even gold can't soften. You're deep into your reign now, and people have stopped referring to you simply as Mansa Musa. Now, it's the Mansa, or the one who went to Mecca, or, if they're particularly poetic, he who tamed gold with grace. One scribe tried Lord of the overflowing purse and the perfect robe. You made him shorten it, twice. But with age comes reflection, and as the nights get longer and cooler, you find yourself revisiting an old question. What is wealth, really? Because let's be honest, you've seen it all. You've walked through storerooms where bricks of gold were piled like spare firewood. You've paid poets in diamonds. You've funded mosques that glitter at dawn. You once gave a storyteller a camel just because he made you laugh hard enough to spill your tea. And yet, there's a certain flatness to it now, a quiet dulling of what once dazzled. So you begin a strange little experiment. You stop wearing gold, not entirely, not every day, but often. You show up to court in plain cotton robes. You wear sandals woven from river reeds. Your advisors panic. Merchants whisper. One governor sends a fruit basket with a note that just says, "Are you okay?" But the effect is powerful. People stop focusing on what glitters and start listening to what you say. One morning, you announce a decree. Every province must fund a school, not just a mosque with a shelf of scrolls, but a dedicated center for learning. Reading, math, astronomy, herbal medicine, local history, whatever the people ask for. Historians still debate how far this policy reached. Some records claim over 100 new schools were built. Others suggest it was closer to 40, with regional variations and lots of goats involved. The truth, as always, is somewhere between the scroll and the shadow. What's clear is this: your empire becomes smarter. Not overnight, not loudly, but steadily. You start seeing it in small ways. Children quoting proverbs you'd forgotten. Farmers tracking weather patterns more precisely. Market disputes resolved with written contracts instead of shouting matches and dramatic arm waving. One town even invents a new form of accounting, using colored stones and song patterns. You award them a royal chicken. They write a folk song about it. Meanwhile, trade flourishes. Caravans grow longer, more sophisticated. Goods flow like water. Ivory, cloth, copper, books, spices. A city on the eastern edge of the empire starts importing dyed glass beads from India. You wear one in your beard for fun. No one comments. Everyone notices. Diplomatic correspondence increases. Letters arrive from Egypt, Grenada, Morocco. One comes all the way from the Delhi Sultanate, sealed in red wax and smelling faintly of cardamom. You don't read it right away. You just enjoy the idea of someone far away thinking of Mali. But not every letter is friendly. Some express concern, fear even. They've heard stories, tales of your pilgrimage, of your gold, of your libraries. And while they don't say it directly, the undertone is clear. You're too rich, too generous, too unpredictable. So you respond the way you always do, with warmth and impeccable calligraphy. You invite them to visit. You send gifts, not gold, books, maps, translations, a box of preserved mango slices that a scholar in Cairo later claims cured his melancholy. Still, you know how politics works, especially across oceans of sand and centuries of ambition. So you begin reinforcing Mali's alliances. You strengthen ties with the Tuareg. You open embassies in major trade cities. You sponsor joint festivals, music, poetry, food. Nothing unites people like a well-spiced stew and a lute solo that lasts just long enough to delay tax negotiations. Internally, you keep adjusting the machine. You replace 3 provincial governors in 1 year. 1 for corruption, 1 for incompetence, and 1 because he tried to outlaw tomatoes. That one still baffles you. You create a rotating advisory council composed of merchants, scholars, clerics, and at least 1 farmer at all times. You like the farmers. They're blunt, funny, and completely immune to court politics. One tells you directly, "We don't need more statues. We need rain." You nod. You fund a new irrigation system. And yet, for all your reforms, all your progress, the weight remains. Not physical, but existential. It's the weight of knowing your decisions ripple outward in ways you'll never see. A coin flipped here changes a market there. A book given here changes a boy's life 5 years later. A minor tax shift triggers a merchant's 3rd divorce. You dream of strings, long, golden strings stretching from your fingers across the empire. Tug one, and a drum falls over in a distant village. Sometimes the responsibility presses on your chest at night. You sit up, drink water, stare at the moon, and you wonder, am I building something that will outlast me? Or just gilding the present so beautifully that no one notices the cracks? Then you go back to sleep, because morning is coming, and you've got a kingdom to keep singing. You wake to the sound of drums, soft, steady, ceremonial. Someone important has arrived, or died, or both. You lose track sometimes, because in Mali, the line between ceremony and daily life is as blurred as camel tracks in morning fog. But this morning, the drumming continues, persistent, rhythmic. You rise, stretch, and pull aside the woven curtain of your sleeping quarters. A breeze brings the scent of tamarind and dust and gold. Ah, that explains it. Today, tribute is being delivered. It's a parade in slow motion, goats in garlands, donkeys with dyed ears, men balancing platters on their heads like golden moons. You recognize emissaries from Gao, Jenne, and a handful of outposts whose names are still unfamiliar on your tongue. They bow, they sing, they unload carts of fabric, copper, carved beads, bundles of dried fish tied with palm fiber, and, of course, gold. So much gold it doesn't shimmer anymore. It just settles. Heavy, familiar, almost bored of itself. You greet them warmly with that signature blend of formality and humor that's become your style. You joke about the size of the goats, the number of fish, the overly generous poetry in the tribute letters. Do I truly illuminate the skies with my wisdom? Only on Wednesdays. The rituals unfold. Thanks are given, prayers offered, scribes scribble, griots nod approvingly. The gold is weighed and catalogued. The fish goes directly to the kitchen. And you? Well, you take a short walk alone. Because tribute, while symbolic, always makes you thoughtful. You didn't create this system, but you've shaped it. You've made Mali into a place where tribute is not just taken. It's welcomed, invited. Because under your reign, the empire gives back. Cities that send gifts also receive schools, markets, safety, grain during famine, books for the ambitious, sanctuary for the curious. Still, you know how fragile this balance is. Historians still debate whether your tribute system was purely political or deeply spiritual. The griots say it honored ancestral harmony. Some skeptics argue it was just clever taxation in fancy hats. You think it's both. Because in Mali, everything is both. Salt is money and medicine. Drums are music and message. A gift is gratitude and strategy. You head to the outer court where your advisors have gathered, already dissecting the tribute delivery, like vultures with spreadsheets. One leans in and says, "The fish from Gao came salted this time. They're learning." You nod. Progress. But today, you're more interested in something else. A small scroll tucked into the sleeve of a young envoy. He hands it to you without a word. You unfold it slowly. It's written in Songhai, with careful lines and oddly poetic phrasing. It reads, "We send you gold, not because we must, but because when we do, our children eat." You sit with that, because that is what you've tried to build. An empire where giving is not a burden, but a bridge. Where wealth flows in more than one direction. Where tribute is not a tax on the powerless, but a shared rhythm. Like call and response. Still, not everyone sees it that way. You hear whispers, distant provinces asking if they still need to send gold, since you seem to have more than anyone else alive. Some claim the tribute is unnecessary, that Mali can govern by trade alone. Others say your generosity has made the outer cities soft, lazy. You respond not with force, but with storytelling. You dispatch griots, not soldiers, to those regions. They arrive with drums, tales, and laughter. They perform in markets, sing the history of Mali, of Sundiata, of you. They remind people that they belong to something bigger, that this gold-strewn, book-loving, sand-bound empire is their story too. And it works. Mostly. Because stories travel faster than threats, and they last longer. You also begin a new custom. Every year, during the tribute season, you choose one province's gift, not based on value, but on meaning, and elevate it 1 year. It's a carved figurine of a crocodile holding a fish, The artist explains it represents patience feeding strength. You place it on the main palace pillar. Another year, it's a clay pot with a poem etched around the rim. You drink from it in court. People notice. The next year, tribute arrives with more poems than gold. You don't mind. You like poems better anyway. These little choices ripple outward. They shape how your people see value. They reshape what wealth means. And yes, there's still gold. Always gold. But it's quieter now. It doesn't define you anymore. It surrounds you, sure. But so do books. Laughter. The sweet clink of teacups. The call to prayer at dawn. The sound of children racing across the palace courtyard, yelling something about imaginary hyenas. And that is wealth. Not the piles of shimmering metal in your vaults, but the softness of daily life, well lived. You close your eyes, listening to the last of the drums fade. For once, they don't signal power, or tribute, or ceremony. They just sound like home. You're sitting in the shade of a low mud wall in Timbuktu, sipping a cup of hot tea that tastes vaguely of cinnamon and memory, when a scholar from Cairo leans in and says, "You know, your visit broke our economy." You smile politely, as if he just complimented your sandals. Because yes, you've heard this before, over and over again. In every city, by every merchant, in a dozen dialects. You gave away too much. You flooded the gold market. You made generosity dangerous. And you keep smiling. Because it's true, sort of. When you passed through Cairo on your pilgrimage, gold flowed like water. You tipped generously, lavishly, gleefully. You paid more than anyone expected. You funded mosques, bought books, gifted scholars, and shopkeepers alike. It wasn't planned. Not exactly. You were just being you. Magnanimous, curious, a little overwhelmed. But it had consequences. Gold lost its luster. Prices soared. Then collapsed. Traders complained. Some said you were careless. Others whispered that you were testing Egypt. The more dramatic theorized, it was a form of economic warfare wrapped in silk and prayer beads. Historians still argue about the scale. Some say you devalued gold across North Africa for a decade. Others think that's an exaggeration, a myth inflated by envious scribes with empty pockets. You think it's fascinating. Because, for once, the world took notice. Maps changed. Literally, European cartographers who had never even heard of Mali before your pilgrimage now marked your empire with golden crowns. One Catalan atlas from 1375 shows you sitting on a throne, a nugget in one hand, a scepter in the other, with a face that looks suspiciously like a confused Spaniard. They didn't get your features right, but they got the idea. You were the man with the gold. And yet, that title, it feels like a costume that doesn't fit anymore, like a robe stitched for someone louder, flashier. Because you've moved beyond gold. In your court, what matters now isn't metal, it's mind. You're more interested in scholars who can recite Ibn Sina than in jewelers who can shape lion-headed belt clasps. You'd rather hear a debate about lunar eclipses than sit through another auction of ceremonial daggers. You've become an academic, a very, very wealthy academic. Your palace has multiple libraries now, not just rooms full of books, but actual systems, manuscripts organized by topic, translated from foreign tongues, annotated in the margins by scribes who argue with the original authors. You even have a team that copies rare works by hand, day after day, in silence so precise it makes your sandals squeak seem disrespectful. You walk those library halls sometimes, running your fingers along the spines of books made of camel leather and dust. Some of the scrolls are so fragile they sigh when unrolled. Others are so densely written. Even your scholars need tea breaks mid-page. And you begin to wonder, what happens when knowledge weighs more than gold? Because it's starting to feel that way. You notice it during council meetings, when your advisors quote legal principles from foreign texts instead of tribal custom. You see it when a 13-year-old student publicly corrects a visiting jurist about astronomy, and no one scolds her. You hear it in the markets, where shopkeepers refer to price trends like economists, not just hagglers. Mali is changing. It's becoming something deeper than powerful, something aware. And the world? It's watching. Ambassadors arrive not just for trade, but for ideas. They come from Morocco, Cairo, Granada. They sit in your courtyards, sip your sweetened tea, and ask questions like, how did you do this? How did you make books spread faster than rumors? You shrug. It wasn't magic. It was investment. In minds. In meaning. In people. Of course, not everyone is thrilled. There are murmurs that you've softened, that you prefer philosophers to warriors, that Mali is losing its edge, trading spears for scrolls. You let them talk, because you know something they don't. You know that empires, built on fear, crumble when fear fades. But empires built on learning, they whisper their way into eternity. You're not trying to conquer. You're trying to echo. And one night, after the Cairo scholar has finally stopped complaining and wandered off to find more tea, you stand on the balcony of your Timbuktu home. Below, the city glows, not with torches or gold, but with quiet conversations. Students reading aloud, teachers humming verses, children reciting maps from memory and giggling when they confuse rivers with mountain ranges. This is your empire now, and it's worth every coin Cairo lost. It starts with a whisper, barefoot footsteps in the courtyard, the rustle of cotton robes, and then the soft tap of fingers on your chamber door. Before you can answer, a voice says, "He's here." You know exactly who. The architect. You rise slowly, rolling your shoulders as if shedding a century of paperwork. You throw on a fresh robe, simple, white, and linen light, and follow the messenger through the winding corridors of your palace. The walls are cool to the touch, patterned with painted clay and mathematical symmetry. A scholar once told you the hallways of your court resemble a thought, curved, mysterious, and just this side of genius. You meet him in the southern garden. Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, the Andalusian architect, who's traveled across deserts and empires to build with you. He bows. You nod. Then you sit beneath a shady awning, and he unrolls a scroll between you like it's a treasure map, which, to you, it is. Lines, domes, courtyards. A minaret shaped like a rising wave. He speaks as he draws, hands moving in rhythm, eyes half closed in concentration. You sip tamarind water and imagine it all. Clay that sings in heat, walls that breathe, mosques that catch the wind and redirect it gently downward, like a sigh from heaven. You don't ask how much it will cost. You ask how long it will last. Historians agree that your partnership with Al-Sahili is one of the most consequential in Mali's architectural history. What they still debate is how much of the design was his and how much was yours. Some claim he simply refined local techniques. Others argue he introduced new styles that changed West African architecture permanently. The truth? Probably both. Because you don't just commission buildings, you inspire them. Your vision is clear. Mali should not only be strong, it should be beautiful. And so begins the golden age of mud. Yes, mud. Don't laugh. This isn't the stuff of puddles and childhood disasters. This is expertly crafted adobe. Sun-dried bricks made of earth, water, straw, and patience. When shaped and layered properly, they can last centuries. And more importantly, they can breathe. You fund the construction of the Jinguaraber Mosque in Timbuktu, a masterpiece of West African design, built from mud and wood, with buttresses like rib cages holding up the sky. The minaret rises like a spiral drum, its edges marked with wooden beams that serve both as decoration and as built-in scaffolding for annual maintenance. Yes, annual. Because this mosque isn't frozen in stone. It's alive. Every year, as the rains approach, the people of Timbuktu gather to replaster the mosque by hand. It becomes a festival, a civic ritual. Children mix clay with their feet. Elders instruct. Teenagers compete to smooth the highest walls. The building isn't just sacred, it's shared. You love that. Because buildings, to you, are like stories. They should be lived in, touched, repaired, whispered through. You don't stop there. You sponsor new mosques in Gao, Jannah, and dozens of smaller cities. Each has its own character, some simple, some grand, some with tiny windows shaped like stars. You build public spaces, shaded courtyards, bathhouses, libraries, gardens. You even commission a new bridge in Nayani, built from palm trunks and clever engineering, strong enough to carry a cart full of copper without even a squeak. And in every project, you insist on beauty. Not opulence, not excess, but harmony, proportion, craftsmanship. You employ artisans from across the empire, stonemasons from the river valleys, carvers from the forest regions, tile makers who sing while they work. You pay them well. You feed them better. You walk the sites often, barefoot as always, because you believe a ruler should feel the dust he's asking others to move. People begin copying your aesthetic. Merchants build shops with curved facades. Farmers construct granaries that mimic mosque designs. Even traveling griots carve geometric patterns into their instruments. Mali begins to look like Mali. Visitors from the north and east start using a new phrase when they speak of your empire. Mali shines without gold. And that makes you prouder than any treasury inventory. Because now, Mali isn't just wealthy. It's thoughtful. And every new wall, every carved beam, every sunlit archway becomes part of your quiet campaign to redefine what an empire can be. Yes, gold may have made the world notice you, but it's mud and vision and shared rituals that will make it remember. One night, you return to the Jinguaraber Mosque alone. The city sleeps. The stars sprawl overhead like spilled salt. You walk along the base of the wall, your fingers tracing the rough, cool surface. You pause at the wooden beams, each jutting out like a sentence in a story still being written. And you think, this is how you build forever. Not with glitter, with hands. The air in Timbuktu changes once the sun sets. It softens, cools, smells like roasted millet, warm stone, and ink. Always ink. Because this isn't just a city of trade or temples anymore. It's becoming a city of texts. You helped build it, yes, but now it builds itself. From the moment the Jinguaraber Mosque opened its wooden doors, scholars began to arrive. Some on donkeys, others on foot, a few in caravans so elaborate you wondered whether they were secretly moving royalty or just very pampered books. They came from all corners of the Islamic world: Cairo, Fez, Damascus, even far-off places like Shiraz. Most arrived with a scroll or three, or questions heavier than their luggage. Some carried their entire libraries in weather-beaten satchels. One man hauled a chest so large it required 4 porters and a small motivational speech. You welcomed them all, because this was the vision. Timbuktu as a beacon. You built its reputation not with proclamations, but with patience. You funded learning. You paid scribes, tutors, and translators. You built dormitories for students, wash houses with separate reading rooms, and shaded halls where debates could rage without anyone overheating. Soon, word spread. This was a place where questions were not punished. They were celebrated. What is the shape of time? Can a soul be divided? Are dreams just the brain's echo? Is salt truly more valuable than gold? The last one caused a shouting match that ended with someone flinging a pickle. You approved. You sat in occasionally, quiet in the back, robes plain, sandals dusty, listening to 20-year-olds confidently dismantle entire branches of theology between bites of honeyed bread. It thrilled you, because knowledge was no longer a luxury. It was a currency. And in Timbuktu, everyone was investing. The city bloomed around its scholarship. Markets adjusted to serve students. Vendors sold notebooks made of bark. Tea shops doubled as study halls. Bookbinders set up stalls next to fishmongers. It wasn't uncommon to see a scholar with ink-stained fingers arguing metaphysics while haggling over dried tilapia. You funded 3 major madrasas, Sankore, Sidi Yahya, and Jingureber, and dozens of smaller ones. Each developed its own specialties. Sankore, for instance, leaned into jurisprudence and logic. Sidi Yahya became known for poetry and ethics. Jinguereber? A little of everything, with a bias toward astronomy. The curriculum was vast and layered. Students began with Arabic grammar and Quranic recitation, then moved into logic, geometry, natural sciences, law, literature. Advanced students debated publicly. Those who excelled were invited to teach. There was no fixed graduation. When a teacher said you were ready, you were ready. Until then, you studied. You listened. You copied. You argued. You ate questionable cafeteria stews and prayed under the same stars your textbooks described. Historians still marvel at the scale of it all. Estimates vary, but some believe that at its peak, Timbuktu housed over 25,000 students. And the manuscripts? Possibly hundreds of thousands. Written in Arabic, Fulani, Songhai, Mandinka, texts on medicine, astronomy, history, law, agriculture, philosophy. Some were original works, others translations or commentaries. A few were so detailed, modern scholars had to squint and admit, okay, maybe we didn't invent everything. You began collecting these works personally. You hired book hunters, yes, actual high school book hunters, to travel the region, trading for rare manuscripts, copying old texts, acquiring everything from poetry to medical treatises on camel anatomy. Soon, you needed more storage, so you funded libraries. Not just dusty vaults, but active spaces, curated, categorized, cataloged by scholars who spent weeks arguing over whether a scroll belonged under medicine or miraculous smells. They ultimately created a 3rd category. And here's the beautiful twist. The people followed your lead. Wealthy merchants started their own private collections. So did imams, teachers, even tailors. A librarian once told you that Timbuktu had more manuscripts than people. You believed him. Because in Mali, under your rule, books became status. Not jewels, not swords, not war trophies. Words. It changed everything. Marriages were proposed with poetry. Court cases quoted philosophers. Children memorized texts between chores. A city that once measured value in gold dust began measuring it in Idas. You walked through those streets often. No guards, no fanfare. People recognized you, of course, but they didn't stop you. They just nodded, as if to say, yes, this is working. Thank you. And sometimes, a student would break protocol and run up to you, breathless, waving a scroll and asking, Mansa, do you think time is real, or just a trick of movement? You'd pause, smile, and say, let me think, because that moment is your real legacy, not the mosque walls, not the piles of gold, not even the pilgrimage that left Cairo in shambles, but this, a child with a question, and the freedom to ask it. There's a sound you come to love, more than drums, more than praise, more than the quiet clink of teacups at dusk. It's the sound of wet clay being slapped into place by dozens of hands. Smack, squish, splat. A symphony of sun, sweat, and tradition. You hear it each year as the rains approach. It's time to replaster the mosques. The Jingoraber Mosque in Timbuktu, the great mud-walled marvel you helped bring to life, needs regular care. It breathes with the seasons, and when the Sahel's sky darkens with that heavy, delicious threat of rain, the people gather with buckets and song. It starts in the early morning. Men, women, children, all ages, all stations, arrive with tools, laughter, and snacks. The older women organize everything. The younger ones run messages, mix water, supervise the clay piles, and remind everyone to stop leaning on freshly plastered walls. No one is paid. No one is ordered. It's just what's done. A civic ritual. And you, Mansa Musa, emperor of Mali, devourer of empires, only metaphorically, of course, you roll up your sleeves and help. Every year. You don't do much. Mostly carry a bucket or two. Dab a wall gently with the flat of your hand. Pose awkwardly when someone insists on sketching you. But your presence matters. It tells people, this place is not above us. It is ours. The work takes days. The mud is special. A blend of local soil, straw, and secret ingredients known only to a few respected masons. One whispers to you that the trick is goat urine. Another claims it's mango peel. A third just winks and says, prayer. Historians still debate the actual mixture. Archaeologists have even scraped bits from ancient walls to analyze their components. They found clay, of course, but also ash, plant fiber, even traces of ground-up baobab bark. Whatever the recipe, the result is miraculous. When finished, the mosque gleams, not with gold, but with effort. The walls glow a rich, earthy tan, warm as bread. The minaret rises above the rooftops like a sun-warmed lighthouse. The air smells of wet earth and small triumphs. And the people? They celebrate. After the final slap of clay, there is music. Tam-tams, balafons, lutes with strings that shimmer like laughter. Children chase each other around the courtyard. Elders lean against walls they helped restore, nodding sagely and offering unsolicited advice. You sit among them, smiling. One sandal off, robe flecked with a bit of mud no one dares clean off. Because this is legacy. Not just buildings that endure, but traditions that involve. You fund many such projects, some grand, like a canal outside Nyani that irrigates 3 villages, some quiet, like the installation of benches beneath baobab trees for traveling elders to rest, some strangely specific, like the commission of extra-wide staircases in the palace, after one too many scholars tripped while gesturing mid-sentence. But the mosque, the mud, that's your favorite. Because it's alive. It must be cared for. It invites attention. It asks for hands, for sweat, for togetherness. It reminds your people that What's sacred isn't separate. It's shared. You visit other cities, and the tradition follows. In Jannah, they build a mosque so grand, people say the birds circle twice just to admire it. In Gao, architects use similar designs, tweaking them slightly. Thicker beams here, narrower windows there. Everyone adds their own flavor. And yet the heart remains the same. Earthen wall, wooden scaffolding, community effort, joy. Foreigners don't always understand. A European visitor once asked why you didn't build your mosques in marble or stone. You just smiled and said, "Because stone doesn't remember your fingerprints." The griots loved that one. They turned it into a proverb. What remembers your touch lasts longer than what forgets your name. Of course, maintaining these structures isn't always easy. One year, a thunderstorm arrives early, turning half-dried plaster into sticky chaos. Children squeal with delight. Adults groan. A camel gets stuck. 2 men try to improvise a rain-proof tarp using nothing but prayer mats and pure optimism. It fails spectacularly. You fund repairs, again, no hesitation. Because the mosque isn't just a building, it's a calendar, a ritual, a reminder. And you're not just an emperor. You're a caretaker, not just of land, but of memory. So, each year, when the mud dries and the walls stand tall again, you run your palm along the cool surface, leave a faint print no one else sees. But it's there, and centuries from now, when the winds shift and the plaster flakes and new hands rise to patch the cracks, someone will stand on that same spot and wonder, who first touched this wall? And the wall will whisper, someone who built with more than stone. It begins with a whisper in the courtyards, always a whisper. The Mansa is building a new school, not a palace, not a gold vault, not a war camp, a school. You've done this before, of course, but each one is a little different, like a song played in a new key. This time, it's in a smaller city on the edge of the empire, Cairo, near the Niger, a trade port, a little dusty, known for fish, reluctant poets, and one particular peanut stew that keeps showing up in your dreams. The request came months ago, tucked into a bundle of market reports and goat census numbers. Just a simple line. We have no formal place to learn. You circled it with ink, sent word, and now the school is rising. You ride out to inspect it yourself. No fanfare, no dancing camels, just you, a few advisors, and a travel kit packed by someone who clearly thinks you'll get lost and need 17 types of nuts. The road is long, winding through fields, villages, salt posts. At one stop, you meet a boy who offers you a riddle in exchange for bread. You solve it, barely. He grins and runs off. You make a note. Hire that boy someday. When you arrive in Cairo, the people greet you shyly. This isn't Timbuktu. There are no book vendors here yet. No scholars in embroidered robes debating syntax. Just merchants and fishermen and a handful of teachers trying to make do with shady trees and uneven benches. You walk the future school grounds. Right now, It's just an outline in the dirt, bricks stacked nearby, like a promise. You speak with the head teacher, a wiry woman with bright eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense. She shows you her library, which is currently 3 scrolls, a clay tablet, and a very proud chicken. You give her 10 scribes, a shipment of manuscripts, and a promise: build minds. Historians often focus on the bigger institutions you built: Sankore, Sidi Yahya, Jingwereber. But scattered across the empire, in small towns and quiet corners, you funded dozens of community schools. And what makes them special isn't the size, it's the approach. You encourage inclusive learning. Girls attend classes alongside boys, not always equally, not yet, but more than in most places of the time. You support programs for orphans, for farmers' children, for the sons and daughters of caravan drivers who pass through only once a month. Lessons are practical. Students study not just theology and grammar, but irrigation, navigation, herbal medicine, currency systems. They learn how to measure rainfall, track market prices, identify useful routes. One teacher invents a whole curriculum around the behavior of ants. You love it. You fund his research. You want people to think, not just memorize. So you invite debate. Students challenge their elders. Tutors question traditional wisdom. Once, a 12-year-old girl rewrites a fable to give the goat a better ending. It causes uproar, then applause, then 3 more rewrites. You visit schools often, unannounced if possible. You sit in the back. Listen. Ask questions like, what color is justice? Or, if a fish swims backward, does the river move? You're not being difficult. You're teaching them how to stretch. And slowly, the schools begin to shape not just individuals, but entire towns. Markets expand to accommodate traveling scholars. Parents start reading along with their children. Scribes are in high demand. Even wedding ceremonies start including poems. And the empire? It shifts. Because literacy is power. Not the kind that swings a sword, but the kind that remembers. And you're investing in memory. Still, you know schools alone don't solve everything. There are droughts, banditry on remote trade routes, nobles who question your obsession with book building over fort building. You hear the grumbles. You even agree with some of them. So you balance. For every school you build, you also fund a grain store, a watchtower, a caravanserai. You make sure that knowledge doesn't float above the people. It walks beside them. One night, you're back in Nayani, reading a report by lamplight. It's late. The crickets outside are louder than usual, or maybe your ears are just tired. A letter is tucked between pages. It's from the teacher in Kabra. She writes, "We had to move class today because the goat took the bench again. But the students recited the stars perfectly. We're getting there." You sit back and smile. Because this is how you build a civilization. Not in one great moment, but in thousands of tiny ones. In goats stealing benches. In children reading constellations. In teachers who don't wait for perfection to start planting light. It starts with a letter, wrapped in silk, sealed with wax, and carried by a rider whose camel smells like it's spent a little too much time near onions. You break the seal with your thumbnail, and the scent of unfamiliar ink hits your nose. Spicy, heavy, exotic. You unfold the parchment. It's from the King of Granada. He writes in florid Arabic, full of compliments, winding metaphors, and phrases like, "to the sun among sovereigns," and "whose wisdom outshines the lamps of the heavens." You roll your eyes fondly. Court language is such a production. Still, the letter is real, and so is the recognition it carries. Because you, Mansa Musa, are no longer just a whisper along the trade routes. You're a diplomatic presence, a curiosity, a name passed around in distant palaces with half disbelief and half envy. Granada is only the latest. You've received letters from Cairo, Fez, Tunis, even a monk from somewhere near Sicily who wrote in Latin so tangled it required 3 translators and a small miracle to decode. Some of these letters are invitations. Some are inquiries. A few are subtle challenges wrapped in flattery. But all of them are signs of a shift. Mali isn't just being noticed. It's being respected. Historians still debate how much formal diplomacy you engaged in. Mali didn't leave behind neat stacks of treaties or protocol manuals. But what is clear is that foreign correspondence increased dramatically during and after your pilgrimage. Some say you initiated it. Others say the world came knocking after hearing about your gold parade through Cairo. You don't really care who started it. You just enjoy the game. Because diplomacy, you've discovered, is a form of storytelling. Everyone is performing, positioning, hoping you'll blink first or flatter second. You reply to Granada with care. You thank them for their letter. You include a small parcel of manuscripts, your personal recommendations, one on ethics, one on rainfall cycles, and one thin scroll of Mandinka proverbs, translated awkwardly but lovingly into Arabic. You also send something else, salt, a single slab, wrapped, stamped, and beautifully presented. No explanation. Let them ponder that. You like subtle messages. In Fez, they sent you a gift box of perfumes, along with a note asking for an exchange of knowledge. You sent back a parcel of Timbuktu manuscripts and a small jar of swamp-smelling paste used to treat camel sore hoof. Message received. Some rulers write to ask about your gold. How much do you really have? Where does it come from? Can we trade? You respond with riddles. How do you count sunlight on water? It drives them wild. But you're not being coy. Not exactly. You simply know that mystery is leverage. If they think you're unpredictable, they'll hesitate. If they think you're divine, they'll be cautious. And if they think you're just a friendly book nerd with a flair for economics, well, that's when you get the best trade deals. You also begin to receive envoys, real ones, dressed in strange silks, wearing perfumes that smell like spices and moonlight. They arrive with gifts, rugs, glass beads, carved boxes, even one mechanical bird that flaps its wings when wounded. You accept everything graciously. Then you throw a banquet. Not to show off. Not really. But because you understand something crucial. Hospitality is diplomacy. You serve yam stews, sweetened rice, roasted plantains. There's music, quiet at first, then wild by dessert. There are dancers, There are griots singing your story, while skipping every third verse just to make the audience lean in. The envoys leave enchanted and slightly tipsy. Your advisors sometimes raise eyebrows at your casual diplomacy. They want ledgers, bullet points, declarations. You prefer jokes. At one meeting, someone asks, "Shall we formalize our agreement with Granada?" You respond, "I already did. I sent them poetry." They pause, then nod. Because somehow it works. And why? Because your empire isn't built on threats or conquest. It's built on reputation, on presence, on that slow, golden confidence that says, "We don't need to shout. You'll hear us anyway." Even the scholars notice. One writes that Mali's diplomacy feels like the river that moves without sound but drowns the unprepared. You frame that line. Hang it in your reception hall. Because, secretly, you love it. You continue the correspondence, carefully, sparingly. Not every letter needs a reply. Not every envoy deserves an audience. But those who come with sincerity, you welcome them. You share meals. You share books. You share, when necessary, the truth about Mali. That it's vast. That it's learned. That it's not going anywhere. One day, maybe they'll write about you in their own histories. Maybe they'll exaggerate. Maybe they'll forget the poetry and focus on the gold. But for now, you send a final letter, this one to Damascus, a short one, 5 lines. At the end, you sign not with a title, but with a drawing, just a sun rising over a scroll. Let them wonder. You rise before dawn. Not because you have to. Let's be honest. You could sleep as late as you want, but because you've never been able to sleep past the first call to prayer. It begins in the distance, soft as breath. One voice, then another, echoing off the mud brick walls of Niani. You sit up, stretch, and feel the slight creak in your spine that wasn't there 10 years ago. It's not pain, exactly. More like history settling in your joints. You wash, pray, dress simply, and then you walk. No guards, no procession, no hovering attendants with extra sandals and backup tea. Just you, barefoot, through the waking streets of the capital. The sky turns pale. Merchants roll open shutters. A boy chases a chicken through a puddle. The scent of roasted corn wafts from a corner stall. A mother calls her children in a voice that sounds like both a threat and a lullaby. This is your favorite time of day, because this simplicity is what the empire protects. You pass scribes sharpening pens, weavers setting up looms, a caravan driver adjusting a saddle, humming to his camel like it's a baby. These are not the grand spectacles that make it into official histories, but they are the threads that hold the empire together. And you? You're the weaver. Back at the palace, the morning council assembles. You sit on the low dais, legs folded, fingers tapping a quiet rhythm against your knee. Reports arrive. A border chief requests grain. A scholar from Gao wants funding for a new theory about lunar tides. A spice trader from the coast says his shipment was delayed by bandits, who oddly left behind the pepper but stole all the cinnamon. You write a note. Investigate. Also, why cinnamon? The affairs of empire are never-ending, but you manage them with patience, curiosity, humor. Historians still marvel at your administrative style. Some describe it as hands-on. Others call it serenely omnipresent, which is just a fancy way of saying he always knew what was going on. Your secret? Listening. You read reports, yes, but you also pay attention to things most rulers ignore. How fast the fish sell in a market. How quiet a school courtyard feels in the heat. Which songs griots are singing most often, and which ones have vanished. You trust these signals more than scrolls, because ruling isn't just about laws. It's about mood, rhythm. You meet with a traveling herbalist who claims she can cure insomnia with crushed baobab leaves and whispered proverbs. You ask her to demonstrate. She promptly puts 3 guards to sleep. You give her a small grant and a warning not to go near your advisors during meetings. You spend part of the day in the archives, personally reviewing land records. Some people find this odd. Surely the Mansa has scribes for this, they whisper. You do. But you also know that land is memory. Who owns what? Who borrowed what? Whose grandfather planted the first mango tree that still stands at the edge of that plot of rice? These details matter, because when people feel seen, they behave differently. You write a few letters, one to a northern governor who's been too quiet lately. You ask how the new irrigation channels are working. One to a child in Timbuktu who sent you a drawing of a giraffe wearing a crown. You tell him the giraffe is officially your new royal advisor. He writes back to suggest a salary of 1 large banana per week. You approve it. This is how you rule. Not with fear, not with spectacle, but with presence. Your schedule is full, but you make time for walks, music, and unexpected visitors. A griot shows up today with a new song about a river that marries a hill. You ask for a performance. Half the court listens. The other half pretends to work while leaning conspicuously in the griot's direction. Later, you meet with judges. Mali's legal system is vast and flexible, a blend of Islamic law, local tradition, and sheer common sense. Disputes range from serious land conflicts to arguments over who owns a particularly talented parrot. You preside quietly. When necessary, you speak. When not, you nod. You ask questions no one else thought to ask. Like, what did the parrot say? Apparently, it kept yelling, "He's lying," which did not help the defendant. You end the day the same way it began, walking. This time through the palace gardens, where the air is thick with the scent of shea blossoms. Crickets chirp. Frogs begin their nightly commentary. You pause at the reflecting pool. The surface is calm. Your face looks older, yes, wiser, maybe, but still curious, still listening. And you think, this is what power really is. Not the gold, not the titles, not even the armies. It's walking through your empire, barefoot, and hearing people laugh. You're sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, sipping a cup of tamarind tea and trying not to yawn while a merchant from Jannah recites the inventory of his warehouses. 17 bolts of indigo cloth, 4 crates of copper ingots, 6 dozen gourds of shea butter, 2 crates of... You raise your hand gently. Are any of these crates making people angry, disappearing mysteriously, or catching fire? The merchant blinks. No, Mansa? Not at the moment. You smile. Wonderful. Then let's assume you're doing fine. Because here's the thing. Wealth is no longer exciting. Not for you. You've had gold braided into your beard. You've eaten from dishes carved out of crystal and watched entire cities bloom from the heat of your generosity. You've collapsed economies with the casual flick of your coin pouch. And now, you mostly want everyone to stop talking about it. Because gold has become boring. Historians love to estimate your wealth. They still do it today. The richest man in history, they say. More than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and all the dragons from Game of Thrones combined. They guess at the tons of gold you controlled, the mines, the tribute, the storage rooms filled with nuggets the size of mangoes. Some even claim your donkeys were gold horseshoes. They didn't. You tried it once. The donkey fell over. Lesson learned. But you don't care about the numbers, because gold is just gold. You've seen what it can do. Yes, it can build things, mosques, roads, schools. It can pay scholars and feed armies. It can dazzle, seduce, elevate. But it can also distract. You've seen traders become greedy. Governors start hoarding. Even scholars argue over donations more than doctrines. A few griots, once humble, funny, proud, now demand extra pay before singing your praises. One of them even tried to charge by the verse. You had to remind him, your words shine when they're true, not when they're expensive. So you begin a quiet campaign. You start downplaying gold. You issue new royal robes made of local cotton instead of imported silk. You host feasts where the plates are clay, not gilded. You begin promoting salt. Yes, salt, as the true symbol of Mali's value. Because salt feeds. Salt preserves. Salt builds muscle. Salt keeps people alive. Gold just glitters. You commission a series of public sculptures, not of lions or warriors, but of farmers, teachers, scribes. You make a speech declaring that Mali's wealth lies in the hands that hold, not the hands that count. It's subtle, but it spreads. Merchants begin boasting less about coin and more about customer trust. Poets switch their metaphors from gold to sunlight, fruit, shade. And the people? They follow your lead, not because you order it, but because they're tired too. Tired of measuring worth in things that don't feed the soul. Still, you keep the mines running. You're not reckless. Gold has its place. It funds the empire. It oils the gears. It's still the backbone of your trade, but it's no longer the face. You even commission a small book, a modest volume titled The Things That Matter. It's handwritten, unadorned, passed from city to city. Inside are stories, proverbs, recipes, tips for irrigation, a guide to teaching under a tree, notes on kindness, and one short essay by a child titled, "Why Mangoes Are Better Than Money." You distribute it quietly. No fanfare. No price. Just a gift. Some say you've gone soft, that you've lost the fire of empire, that a man who once made Cairo faint with gold now hands out storybooks like a traveling uncle. You hear it. You don't care, because you're no longer trying to impress the world. You're trying to shape it. And the older you get, the more you understand. Real wealth isn't about what you own. It's about what you leave behind. A city that reads, a market that trusts, a child who believes her questions are worth answering. So when a caravan arrives from the north, begging to buy more of your gold for coins and crowns, you smile and say, "We're exporting wisdom this year. The gold is resting." You've returned from yet another tour of the southern provinces, sunburnt, sand-dusted, and deeply confused about whether or not one of your governors actually invented a new calendar using only banana leaves and bad poetry. You leave it to the scribes to investigate, politely, carefully. But as you settle back into the rhythm of palace life, you feel it creeping in again. That subtle weight, soft and scratchy, like a wool blanket you didn't ask for. The kind of weariness not cured by sleep. A pilgrimage hangover of sorts. Not physical. Not anymore. No. This is the long tale of consequence. The part of greatness no one really warns you about. The part after the parade. After the applause. After the glory. Because here's the truth. Returning from Mecca didn't mark the peak of your life. It marked the beginning of everything else. And it hasn't been easy. For one, the climate's been unkind. 3 years of erratic rains. Then a dry season that seems to go on forever. Crops wither. Rivers pull back like shy snakes. Herds thin. Prices rise. And the people begin to murmur. Not against you, but against the sky. You can't command the clouds, so you do what you can. You release grain from royal stores, suspend taxes in the hardest hit regions, commission public works that provide both wages and purpose. It helps, but not enough. Some nobles grumble, especially the ones whose storehouses are still full. They say your generosity makes the people lazy. That hunger sharpens the spirit. You invite them to dinner, serve nothing but air and empty bowls. You don't speak. They don't grumble again. But tensions remain. Trade slows. Caravans take longer routes. Bandits grow bold on the fringes. One particularly ambitious group tries to rob a salt caravan using disguises made entirely from palm leaves. You're both impressed and exasperated. You send extra guards, offer better pay, build new watchtowers shaped like drums, because everything is still fixable, but only if caught early. Meanwhile, the court grows restless. The older advisors retire, or die, or simply disappear into books and hammocks. The younger ones are eager, sharp, sometimes reckless. They want to do things, change laws, expand borders, redesign the coinage. You listen. Then ask, what problem are you solving? Silence. Because sometimes change is just motion in a costume. You tell them, don't confuse noise with progress. A fire crackles, but so does a dying candle. They scribble that down like it's a riddle. It kind of is. Then there's the paperwork. You return from one 3-week trip to find 117 petitions waiting in a stack that smells suspiciously like fermented dates and disappointment. You read them all. One is written entirely in verse. Another includes a hand-drawn map of a chicken coop and a long argument about rooster inheritance rights. You add a note to that one. Give them a mediator and possibly a rooster. These are the things that occupy you now. Not battles, not crowns, but details. The kinds of problems that make empires hum or crumble. And they are draining, because every day someone needs something. A road repaired, a neighbor restrained, a scholar funded, a fence moved 3 handspans to the left. You love it most days. But some mornings, you look out across the Niger and wonder, how long can one man carry an empire without setting it down just once? And yet, you don't stop. Because you know what happens when rulers look away for too long. You've read the histories, heard the griots' tales. Power drifts, focus fades. And soon, someone else is making decisions for you, wearing your robes, forgetting your promises. So you stay alert, even when you're tired, even when the gold feels heavy, and the praise feels like echoes in an empty hall, because somewhere, out in the far edge of the empire, a mother is teaching her daughter how to write her name in the dirt. And that's the legacy that matters. Not the coins, not the titles, but the quiet promise that knowledge will continue long after you've stopped signing the letters. There's a man in your court whose only job is to listen to stories. Officially, he's called a court historian. Unofficially, people call him the basket because everything ends up in him eventually. Rumors, legends, jokes, grocery lists accidentally dictated during morning meetings. He carries a wax tablet, a long beard, and the distinct look of someone who's always 6 seconds from interrupting you with an anecdote. And you adore him, because storytelling in your empire isn't just entertainment. It's infrastructure. You fund it, actively, generously. You sponsor griots, historians, poets, wandering narrators who can recite genealogies longer than most family arguments. You fund scribes to copy their stories. You give them shade, food, scrolls, sometimes even retirement plans. Why? Because you understand that memory is power. A written treaty fades. A military victory crumbles. But a story, especially one with rhythm, lives on. You still remember one from your childhood. A griot told it in a market square somewhere near Kangaba about a lion who wanted to be king but was afraid of Fra. You laughed so hard you choked on boiled yam. That story followed you your whole life, and now you want yours to follow others. So you start commissioning tales, not about battles, not about treasure, but about the everyday magic of Mali. How a farmer in Djenne predicts weather by watching butterflies. How salt traders make maps from memory and mango peels. How a girl in Gao discovered a new kind of counting by stacking stones in 7-pointed circles. You want these stories preserved, so you assign scribes, dozens of them. You even build a special wing in the Timbuktu library just for narrative knowledge. The sign above the door simply says, "These are true, even when they aren't." Historians still debate whether this was the first state-funded oral history archive in Africa. Some say yes. Others argue that griots don't need walls to be remembered. You say, why not both? You also do something unusual. You tell your own stories. Not officially, not through speeches or scrolls, but in casual moments, on porches, during tea, while adjusting a saddle. You talk about your journey to Mecca, yes, but also about the time a camel sneezed on your favorite robe, or when you got hopelessly lost in your own garden because someone moved a pomegranate bush. You make yourself human. And it works. Because when people hear your name now, they don't just think wealth or Mansa or gold avalanche in Cairo. They think of your laugh, your walk, your habit of quoting poets at breakfast. They remember you, and they begin to tell their own versions. One griot swears you once solved a legal case by asking the disputing parties to act it out like a play. Another insists you can identify spices by smell alone. A traveling merchant claims he saw you juggle dates once, very badly, during a sandstorm. You don't correct them, because the point of a good story isn't accuracy. It's connection. One afternoon, you sit under a neem tree with 3 young apprentices. They're scribes in training, full of questions and crumbs. You ask them, "What story will you tell of me when I'm gone?" They blink, shrug. One mutters, "The one with the gold." Another says, "The mosque." The third says, "You always walk around barefoot." You grin. All true, and none of them complete. You leave them with an assignment. Tell a story about me that doesn't involve gold at all. They groan, but they try. And hours later, you read their scrolls. One writes about your patience. One writes about your habit of listening before speaking. And one, your favorite, writes about how you never interrupt anyone, except when tea is about to spill. You hang that one in your study, because that's the version of you that matters now. Not the emperor on a throne of coins, but the man with his feet in the dirt and his ears open. The man who made stories as valuable as salt. The man who taught his empire to remember itself. It starts with a whisper on the trade routes. Whispers, always. Faster than messengers, slipperier than sand. Someone out east, a distant relative of Genghis Khan, a powerful ruler with a sharp beard and sharper ambition. He's taken control of territory that touches the edge of your trading sphere, and word is, he's been taxing merchants traveling west. At first, you shrug. Mali is far. Its borders stretch over savanna and desert, but not quite that far. Not yet. But the merchants begin complaining. Salt caravans are being delayed. Toll prices are inconsistent. One trader swears that he had to pay a singing fee just to cross a bridge. Another claims his camels were detained until they performed a dance. You don't believe everything, but you believe enough. So, you do what you always do. You send letters. Polite ones, thoughtful, friendly, full of phrases like mutual prosperity and respectful boundaries. You mention trade volume, caravan routes, and the unfortunate effect sudden tolls might have on coastal cinnamon imports. You get no reply, not even a fruit basket. Historians still argue who this rival was. Some say it was a regional khanate operating under loose Mongol rule. Others believe it was a rogue warlord posing as someone more important. The name changes in every version of the story. What stays the same is the tension. Because now you have a choice. Push back, risk conflict, or adapt, find another route. You choose salt, literally. You decide to strengthen the southern trade routes, fund new wells, clear paths, post guards. You send envoys southward, through jungles and along rivers, negotiating with local leaders for safer, shorter paths. One local ruler demands 3 goats and a drum. You send 5 goats and 2 drums. Always overdue kindness. Trade shifts. Slowly. Elegantly. Like a dancer changing steps mid-performance. And the eastern would-be Khan? He notices. Because caravans no longer stop at his gates. They pass him by. His toll collectors sit bored. His singing bridge enterprise collapses. One report claims he tried to replace lost toll revenue by charging shade tax under a particularly large tree. It didn't go well. Eventually, a letter arrives. Stiff, formal, vaguely regretful. You respond warmly, graciously, with an invitation to share poetry and perhaps some smoked fish, if he's ever in the neighborhood. You're not angry. You're just better at networks. Because Mali doesn't just move wood and salt and cloth. It moves ideas, and you're an artist with infrastructure. You build weighing stations, rest stops, safe house shelters staffed by clerics and guards. You give merchants guidebooks with friendly towns marked in ink, and shady ones marked in ominous drawings of lizards. You standardize trade laws across provinces. No more arbitrary tolls. No surprise taxes. No goat bribes disguised as consultation fees. You print the laws on scrolls, palm leaf copies, even murals in markets for those who can't read. Justice, you say, should be as visible as bread. And the results? Stunning. Trade increases. Tensions ease. Merchants trust you more. Cities boom. Even the rival out east, who never does visit, quietly adjusts his policies. You hear his people started planting date palms instead of demanding tolls. A win in your book. And that's the lesson you write in your personal journal one night, under a sky thick with stars. Let others sharpen swords. I will sharpen roots. Because real power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks softly, smoothly, over sand so well maintained you don't even notice your empire growing beneath your feet. It's Monday. You know this not because anyone tells you, but because the grievances have already lined up outside the palace gates, neatly, nervously, and with enough dramatic sighing to power a windmill. Welcome to Malian Mondays. Every week, without fail, you open the court to petitions from the public, no matter who they are, no matter how small the complaint, no matter how strange. And oh, the strange ones always come early. A woman accuses her neighbor's goat of staring at her roof for too long. A man claims the local imam is secretly hoarding mangoes. A 7-year-old brings a complaint against her brother for thinking loudly. You listen to them all. Because for you, justice isn't just law. It's presence. It's showing up. It's reminding people that someone hears them, even when their problem sounds like the beginning of a joke. You sit on a low platform. Nothing fancy. A woven mat beneath you. Your scribes on either side. A small fan turning slowly overhead, squeaking like it's trying to remember a tune. The room is open air, shaded by mud columns and flowering vines. Birds flit in and out. Sometimes they interrupt. Once, a pigeon landed on your scrolls and tried to eat a legal document. You kept that scroll. It now has a tiny beak hole in Article 4. People take turns stepping forward. Some are nervous. Some are furious. Some try to impress you with poetry before getting to the point. You once had a petitioner who wrapped his entire land dispute. You gave him a mango and ruled in his favor. Today's lineup is more typical. A fisherman claims another has encroached on his favorite spot. A merchant wants tax relief after a termite infestation in his spice shed. A woman seeks permission to rebuild her home 1 cubit wider. Her neighbor insists that extra cubit contains a sacred pebble and cannot be moved. You take them all seriously, because you've learned that small problems, left to fester, grow legs, and start knocking over furniture. You ask careful questions. How long has the pebble been there? Has the goat always stared at your roof? Or is this new behavior? You're calm, kind, sharp when needed. Historians often praise your economic policies, your pilgrimage, your libraries. But those who really understand Mali know the magic was in Mondays. This was where you kept the empire together. Not by decree, but by dialogue. Because empires are made of people. And people are gloriously, maddeningly, hilariously inconsistent. One week, they're shouting about tax codes. The next, they're forming a band to honor the new water pump. You watch. You learn. You begin to notice patterns. Certain neighborhoods file more complaints. Certain types of disputes over wells, grazing paths, borrowed grain crop up repeatedly. So you send mediators, trained not just in law, but in listening. You fund workshops. You introduce a simple idea. Local councils, elected by the community, trained to settle minor disputes so the imperial court can focus on larger ones. Some embrace it. Others resist. Especially the elders, who believe wisdom lives exclusively in their elbows. But over time, it works. Your Mondays get shorter, more efficient, but never less human. You still pause for laughter, for storytelling, for that one woman who always brings you tamarind candy wrapped in old scroll fragments. And you document everything. Each case, no matter how small, gets written down, stored, analyzed. Not to create a police state, but to understand your people. You discover things where droughts are beginning, where teachers are most respected, where families are thriving, and where something's broken You see your empire not just as geography, but as emotion, memory, complaint. And the complaints? They're a gift. They show you where to lean in. They teach you how to fix what maps can't show. Because an empire isn't just lines on parchment. It's a woman asking if she can move a pebble. It's a boy explaining that goats do, in fact, have opinions. It's Monday, and you are still listening. The sun hangs low, swollen and gold, like a ripe fruit waiting to drop behind the horizon. You're in your private garden, feet in the grass, robe rumpled just enough to make your advisors twitch. You've had one too many meetings today. Trade reports, legal revisions, the Water Council arguing about fountain locations, and someone tried to convince you to adopt royal flamingos as official state birds. You told them you'd sleep on it. You will not. But now the day's done, and the city is quieting. You hear laughter somewhere near the kitchens. A soft ting-ting of spoons against pots, the familiar rhythm of evening settling in. And that's when it happens. A small girl, 6, maybe 7, appears at the edge of the garden, barefoot, clutching a folded paper and a mango. She doesn't bow. She doesn't ask. She just walks up, plops the mango next to your foot, hands you the paper, and says, "This is from my father." You nod. Thank her. She leaves as quickly as she came, skipping back toward the shadows like a breeze with knees. You open the paper. Inside is a letter, short, handwritten, ink blotched. You gave me work when I needed it. My daughter is learning to write. I wanted you to know. This mango is from our tree, grown this year, the first time it's fruited. You sit there for a long time, holding the mango, not because you're hungry, because it's perfect, smooth, fragrant, slightly warm from the girl's hands. And in that moment, it feels heavier than gold, more permanent than any decree, sweeter than any praise. Because this is the point. Not conquest, not coins, but continuity. A father who could plant, a daughter who can write, a fruit that traveled from tree to table, not through trade, but through gratitude. You eat it slowly, savoring. You don't tell anyone. But the next morning, you send a letter to the Ministry of Agriculture. Fund mango trees for every school courtyard. Make sure the children can reach them. And then you write another to the Ministry of Learning. Start collecting student letters. Archive them. They will matter. Because you've begun to see that the most powerful parts of your empire are the ones that grow quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. Not the battles, not the markets, but the tiny investments that turn into generations. Later that week, you visit a school on the outskirts of Niani. You sit at the back of the class while the students practice writing their names in sand with sticks. One boy draws his upside down. One girl adds a flourish that clearly means, "I'm fabulous." You beam. You ask them questions, not about history, but about dreams. What would you build? What would you write? What would you teach? Their answers are wild. beautiful, slightly terrifying. One wants to write a book about lizards who run the moon. Another wants to build a library that floats. A third wants to open a school that only teaches jokes. You fund all three ideas, not because they'll succeed, but because they might inspire someone else who will. And as you leave, one of the teachers hands you a bundle of papers, essays, poems, scribbles. You read them all that night. Some are nonsense. Some are brilliant. All of them are honest. You realize, with a strange ache in your chest, that these children will outlive you. Their words will. Their questions will. And if you've done your job right, they won't need to remember your name to benefit from what you built. They'll walk beneath mango trees. They'll read in the shade. They'll whisper answers to stars that you once tried to name. And somewhere, maybe, a little girl will walk barefoot into a garden and hand an old man a fruit grown from a promise. The rain comes late this year. You wait for it, listening for the familiar hush of clouds pulling their sleeves over the sun, for that first drop's gentle pat against the palace roof. But it doesn't come. Weeks stretch like pulled cotton. The air grows thick. Wells begin to sigh. Farmers shift anxiously in mosque courtyards. And you begin counting. Not the gold, but the prayers. You're not the only one. In every village, hands lift. In every city, voices rise. Rain has always been Mali's most fickle visitor. Generous one year, withholding the next. You've seen both. You've planned for both. But this year, it waits longer than usual. So, you call a meeting. Not with generals, not with merchants, with elders. Old women who've read the seasons in goat ankles. Old men who speak to trees before they bloom. One arrives with a pouch full of dried frogs. You do not ask. You listen. They tell you stories, not solutions. Stories of past droughts, of migration, of patience, of that one time the millet still grew because someone remembered to sing to it. You thank them. You send them home with tea and gifts. Then you act. You open the grain reserves. You cancel taxes on water-drawing tools. You fund well repairs. You instruct that no one may be charged for shade. You also do something unexpected. You organize a festival. Yes, during a drought. Your advisors stare. You explain. If fear grows too big, it cracks the ground before the sun does. So you invite everyone. Peasants, poets, scholars, drummers. You provide food, modest, but plenty. You hang lanterns in the trees, soft and glowing, like upside-down moons. You call it the Festival of Waiting. There is no dancing, no feasting, just storytelling. Every village sends a griot. Every griot tells one tale about endurance, about dry seasons that ended, about resilience in the shape of a seed. You sit and listen all night. So do thousands of others. And in the days that follow, something shifts. Not the sky, not yet, but the mood. Fear fades. Faith settles. People return to their fields. They water with care. They share more. A young boy starts distributing buckets filled from a slow stream, free of charge. You award him a medal made of wood, and the title, Bearer of Hope. Then, one morning, you wake to a sound that feels like memory returning. Rain, not a storm, just a soft, steady curtain whispering across roofs, through trees, into the cracks of a thirsty city. You go out barefoot. Let it hit your face. Everywhere, people cheer, laugh, weep. You walk through the streets with no guards. Children jump in puddles. One hands you a worm like it's treasure. You accept it. And quietly, you know, this empire doesn't run on gold. It runs on timing, on trust, on the faith that something will arrive, even if it's late, as long as you hold space for it. Later, the griots will add this to their songs. They'll say the Mansa called the rain with kindness. You'll never correct them, because some myths are truer than facts. And besides, it rained. Your joints have started making little noises, clicks and creaks, like old doors in a friendly house. Nothing painful, just reminders. Reminders that time isn't standing still, even if your empire seems to. You sit on your favorite veranda, watching a bird bathe in the courtyard fountain you had built 20 years ago. You remember when the first drops hit its basin, how the workers cheered, how the children ran through the spray. Now the stone is worn smooth. Now the children have children. And you're thinking about endings, not because you're dying. Not yet. At least, not in any dramatic, coughing blood into a cloth kind of way. But the awareness is there, quiet, like a shadow that doesn't leave even when the sun goes down. You've ruled for decades. You've shaped cities, roads, customs. You've buried friends. You've held babies who now sit in council meetings and argue about grain allocation like it's poetry. You've built a name that stretches from the Atlantic coast to the Red Sea. But a name isn't a plan. And so, you begin to think carefully about the thing all rulers dread and delay: succession. Historians will argue about your choices. They'll question your methods. They'll dissect your family tree like scholars with too much ink and not enough sleep. But one thing is clear. You didn't ignore the problem. You start early. You gather your sons, your nephews, your cousins. You meet with each one, not with ceremony, but with conversation. You ask questions. What matters most to you? What would you build? What do you fear? Some answer with grace, some with ambition. One simply says, "I want your sandals." You respect the honesty, but more than their answers, you watch how they move, how they treat servants, how they listen, how they pause, if they pause, before speaking. You choose carefully, not just an heir, but a team. You establish a council of continuity, trusted advisors, family members, scholars. Their job isn't to rule. It's to steady the next ruler. You write a charter for them, one that opens with this line: an empire should never lean on one spine. Then you begin the slow transfer. You let your successor attend court with you, speak on your behalf, sign minor decrees, Get things wrong. Get corrected. Get better. It's painful sometimes. You watch decisions wobble, but you let it happen, because legacy without learning is just decoration. You also spend time with your people, more than usual. You walk through markets, visit schools, sit in mosques. You don't announce it. You just show up, barefoot, always. No guards, maybe a scribe or two who try not to look nervous. And wherever you go, you listen to what they say, to what they don't. One old woman pulls you aside and says, "When you leave, make sure the next one still walks." You nod. You carve that into a stone tablet and place it at the palace gate. You write letters, too, to your successor, dozens of them, little scrolls tied in bundles. Some contain advice. Others are just jokes. One is a list of your favorite mango vendors, ranked by friendliness, not flavor. You label them, "To be read when you miss me," because you know there will be a moment, maybe in a quiet hallway, maybe during a bad harvest, when the weight will feel unbearable. And you want your voice to be there, not as command, but as comfort. You don't fear death. You fear forgetting, not of yourself, of the mission, to build not just power, but possibility, to lead not through fear, but example, to remind people that empires aren't made of walls, they're made of moments. And you've had a good run. One evening, your successor sits beside you, nervous. He asks, "What if I ruin it?" You look at him, hand him a mango, and say, "Start by planting this seed. You'll be fine." The wind shifts that night, just a little, just enough for the scent of the river to reach your chamber window. Mud, fish, damp reed, the faint sweetness of lilies tangled in the current. It carries something else, too. Memory. You sit by the window and let it roll over you. You don't speak, but the stories speak for you. Because at this stage of life, you don't just recall events, you re-inhabit them. Scenes unroll behind your eyelids like a slow-moving parade. You remember your first council meeting? Hands too steady, because you were trying too hard not to tremble. You remember the first time someone called you Mansa, with reverence instead of obligation. You remember the day you left for Mecca, the way the horizon seemed wider than anything your maps could describe. And you remember coming home to a kingdom that no longer whispered about its greatness. It sang it. But tonight, what comes back isn't the gold or the court or the scholars. It's a single image. Your mother braiding your hair by firelight, telling you, "Power is just borrowing the people's trust. Return it clean." You were 9. You didn't understand. You do now. You sit back, exhale, and realize you're ready to begin something no emperor likes to admit. The letting go. Not of your empire, not yet, but of being at the center of it. You delegate more. Your successor now leads half the meetings. Your council makes more decisions without you. They still seek your nod, your glance, your blessing. But they've started trusting themselves, and that, more than anything, gives you peace. You've even left the capital a few times without alerting the court. Just wandered. One time, you went to a fishing village so small it didn't even have a name. You ate roasted maize with a boy who thought Timbuktu was a kind of fruit. You left him a book about stars and never said who you were. The next week, his teacher wrote to say he'd started drawing constellations in the sand and calling them sky poems. You wept quietly into your tea. Because this is the thing no one tells you about ruling. You can't measure legacy in years or coins or monuments. You measure it in ripples. A child learning to write. A grandmother no longer walking miles for water. A merchant who tells the truth, even when he doesn't have to. And sometimes, you don't even see the ripples. You just send out the stone and trust the water. But tonight, you feel it all coming together. The years, the choices, the grain shipments and school charters and mango trees and salt roots. You've layered your empire, not like bricks, but like music, a bass of justice, a rhythm of trade, a melody of learning, and, just for sparkle, the occasional golden solo. But you didn't compose alone. You had advisors, griots, builders, farmers, scribes, storytellers, cooks, camel trainers, stubborn elders, mischievous children, and one man who still insists the empire should adopt owls as national symbols. You've let them all shape it. And now it stands, not perfectly, not forever, but firmly, beautifully. So you start writing again, not decrees, not laws, but letters to strangers, to villages, to schools, to people you've never met, who've never seen your face, but who live inside your story now. You sign them not as Mansa Musa, but as simply one who served. Because that's what you've learned. Not to shine, not to conquer, but to serve, and to trust that service will echo longer than a crown. The moon is full tonight, round and bold, a quiet spotlight on your empire. You sit beneath it, wrapped in a soft wool cloak, sipping something warm and sweet from a carved gourd. Around you, the palace has gone still. The courtyards are empty. The scribes are snoring. Even the frogs have called it a night. You like these hours best, because no one expects anything from you now. No questions, no petitions, no interruptions, just stillness. And in that stillness, you find yourself doing something you rarely admit to anyone. Not even your advisors, not even the griots. You wonder what they'll say about you. Not now, not tomorrow, not while you're still walking these halls and answering scrolls and pretending to enjoy committee meetings about salt taxation. You mean later, when your bones are dust and your name becomes a verse in someone's song. You've heard some of the myths already, even in your lifetime, that you turned desert into rivers, that you could taste gold to tell where it came from, that you once silenced a war with a single poem. They're wrong, but they're not entirely wrong, because what you did was quieter, slower, truer. You didn't conjure wealth. You redistributed it You didn't invent learning. You invited it in, fed it tea, and built it a house with wide windows. You didn't end wars, but you delayed them, prevented some, lessened others. You didn't always get it right. There were judgments you regret, governors you trusted too long, scholars you should have supported sooner. And yes, cities you favored more than others. You are not without flaws, but that's not what people remember. They remember how you walked, always barefoot, always among them. They remember how you sat through the stories, even the long ones, even the ones with too many goats. They remember the time you stopped a feast to help an old woman find her sandal. They remember how you once paid a teacher's entire salary in salt and books because he said gold made him nervous. They remember your laughter, low, slow, like someone shaking coins in a clay jar. You chuckle at that memory now, alone under the moon, a little cold, but warm in places that aren't your skin. And you realize something strange is happening. You are starting to miss them, the people, the questions, even the bickering. You're still here, of course, but you've begun pulling back, not out of resentment, not out of fatigue, but to make space for what comes next. Your successor is stepping into the light more often. He speaks now at festivals, issues minor decrees, walks alone through markets and returns with new words for fish and mango in 3 dialects. You watch him from the shadows, not judging, just witnessing. And when he falters, because he does, you wait until the courtyard is empty and offer him advice the same way your mother offered you firewood, quietly, but with intention. You've even noticed the people doing something new. They've started greeting him like they once greeted you. They say, Mansa. You feel a pang, not of jealousy, of completion. Because this is what all good rulers must face. The moment when their name becomes a bridge instead of a throne. You are no longer the weight. You are the foundation. You're reminded of a story an old griot told when you were just a boy. About a tree that grew so large, its own branches shaded the next sapling to rise. The moral was never about the tree. It was about the shade. And now, you offer yours freely. To the next one. To the future. To whoever needs a place to stand while they figure out how to lead. You drain your gourd. Wipe your hands. Look up at the stars and whisper, just for yourself. Let them remember my shade. There's a chair in the corner of your study. Nothing grand, nothing gilded, just an old wooden seat with one uneven leg and a cushion that's seen better centuries. You sit in it every afternoon now. Not for meetings, not for planning, just to read. Not official reports or legal scrolls or economic forecasts. Those still exist, of course, and you still nod through them dutifully. But here, in this chair, you read something else. Letters. Hundreds of them. From students, from traders, from mothers and midwives and monks, from boys who want to be scribes, and girls who want to be griots, from old men who claim to remember your pilgrimage, even if they were only 2, and mostly remember the camels. Your staff filters the letters, organizes them, translates them when necessary. But you insist on reading them yourself, because these aren't just messages. They're mirrors, tiny reflections of the empire you've helped build. One letter reads, "I learned to read because my sister taught me after she learned at the school you funded." Another says, "I saw you once in Timbuktu. You didn't see me, but you stopped to talk to a baker, and I've never forgotten how long you listened." And another, scrawled in messy ink on what looks like the back of a fish wrapper, simply says, "Thanks. It's better here now." You fold that one carefully, place it in a small wooden box. You call it your chest of enough, because sometimes you need reminders that what you've done, what you've tried to do, is working. Not perfectly, not always visibly, but truly. Historians often write about your policies, your wealth, your pilgrimage, your architectural patronage. They count your buildings and track your influence through tax records and trade routes. But the soul of your reign, it lives in these letters, in voices that tremble or tease or trip over their own gratitude. You begin writing back, not to all of them. You couldn't, even if you wanted to, but to a few, each week. Short replies, handwritten, no official seal, just words. Sometimes it's advice, sometimes encouragement. Once, it's a doodle of a camel wearing a turban, sent to a young artist who swears he invented desert fashion. He writes back 6 months later. The camel design is now a market favorite. We named it Mansa Musa. You laugh so hard, you spill your tea. You write back, "Don't let it wear shoes. Camels hate shoes." And in this exchange, this ridiculous, joyful, unexpected moment, you realize something. Your empire is evolving without you. And that's not a threat. It's a blessing. Because a true legacy isn't what you control. It's what continues when you're not in the room. The schools keep teaching. The griots keep composing. The scribes keep copying. The markets keep buzzing. The farmers keep planting. The children keep naming things after you, even when they don't quite remember who you were. One day, a messenger brings a letter from a village far to the east. Inside, a child has drawn a picture of what she thinks you look like. You're 8 feet tall, riding a goat, with stars in your beard, and books for shoes. You hang it on your wall, because it's wrong in every way, and yet, somehow, exactly right. You're no longer the man you were. You're becoming the story, the shape, the spark. And honestly, you're okay with that. There's a particular hour in the afternoon, just before the sun begins to sag, but long after lunch has faded, where everything seems to slow. The scribes take longer blinks. The guards lean just a bit more on their spears. The breeze, when it comes, feels like a lazy yawn stretched across the sky. And in that hour, you retreat to a small room near the back of the palace. A quiet room, lined with cushions, scrolls, and a single open window, shaped like a teardrop. This is where you come to forget your Mansa Musa. Not forever, just for a little while. You sit on the floor, cross-legged, fingers resting on your knees. The wind rustles a scroll. A gecko flicks across the far wall. Somewhere, a flute plays a tune too slow to dance to. And you breathe. You've taken to calling this your unraveling room, the place where the threads of duty, ego, and expectation fall loose for an hour. You don't plan. You don't lead. You simply exist. Sometimes you pray, not always with words, often with just presence, with silence thick enough to feel like a kind of conversation. Sometimes you think about death, not in fear, in familiarity, like an old friend who will someday arrive without knocking. And you want to be ready, not by resisting, but by having nothing left to prove. Other times, you think about your first mango, not the first one you ever ate, the first one you ever grew. You were a boy, and you buried the pit by mistake. A week later, it sprouted. No one noticed but you. You watered it every morning. It died anyway. But in those few weeks, you learned something no tutor ever taught. Not everything that grows is meant to last, but everything that grows is worth planting. You smile at the memory, and then your mind drifts again to a road stretching across the Sahel, caravans moving, camels groaning, men laughing, dust rising like history made visible. You've walked that road many times, in dreams, more often than in reality these days. It's always there, waiting, a symbol, a scar, a spine. You once thought the road was the destination. Now you know better. The road is the empire, and your job was never to pave it forever, just to keep it walkable. For others, you've started collecting small items in this room, not treasures, not awards, things that whisper rather than shout. A cracked teacup from a village that once fed your whole caravan without asking for a coin. A shoe carved from wood, made by a blind craftsman who swore he could feel your foot size by your voice. A stone from Mecca, one you didn't buy, just found near the base of a well. You line them up by the window, not in display, in gratitude. These are the things that remind you who you were before the gold, before the pilgrims, before the maps changed to include your name. Just a boy who listened well, who asked big questions, who once believed the stars were tiny holes in the sky that let heaven peek through. You still believe that, a little, especially on nights when the world feels thin and dreams come wrapped in birdsong. Today, you spend your hour watching the wind play with the curtain. You think of nothing, and it feels like everything. Because in this space, in this breath, in this unburdened hour, you are not Mansa Musa. You are just Musa. And that is enough. You receive a gift today, wrapped in reed fiber, tied with dyed twine, smelling faintly of honey and river clay. It's from the scribes of Jenne. You recognize the script before you even unroll it. Tight, precise, a little dramatic, as if the letters were posing for a painting. Inside, a freshly copied manuscript of one of your earliest decrees, dated over 30 years ago. You pause. You remember writing it. Your hand was younger then. So was your voice. So was your certainty. It was the decree that established Timbuktu's first scriptorium. Your declaration that knowledge must have roots, that a book unread is no better than a grain unplanted. Back then, it felt revolutionary. Now, it feels nostalgic, because the manuscript is still beautiful, still sharp, still true. But the world it entered? It has changed. Your empire is no longer a place of beginnings. It's a place of inheritance. You used to build things, personally, meticulously, oversaw every tile, weighed every word, tasted every bit of advice before serving it to the people. Now you watch others build. It's strange, humbling, beautiful, sometimes maddening. You see your former students, now governors, teachers, translators, launching their own projects. A young woman opens a school in a desert village using reed mats and nothing else. A merchant funds a traveling poetry troupe that performs in markets and ends every show with the line, "And remember, Mali listens." You didn't write that line, but you let it spread, because this is how you lead now. Not with a grip, but with a gesture. You support, you bless, you get out of the way. Some days you miss the control. You miss knowing exactly where every shipment of salt is headed and why. You miss drawing new border routes in the sand with a stick and watching them come alive the next season. But you don't interfere, because what's growing now isn't yours to own. It belongs to those who will walk further than you ever could. Historians will later marvel at this phase of your reign. Some call it the golden wind down. Others call it your quiet renaissance. A few say you retired without retiring. You say, "I simply got better at listening." You now spend most mornings in conversation. Not with generals, not even with your successor. With people who don't need you to fix things. Just witness them. A storyteller who composes lullabies based on rainfall patterns. A trader who figured out how to transport milk without it spoiling in the heat. She uses clay spheres and wool. You gave her a medal. A group of young scholars working on translating ancient medical texts. They ask for funding. You give them something more: space, time, and permission to fail without fear. You attend their first presentation. It's disorganized, chaotic, joyful. You don't understand half of it. You applaud anyway. Afterward, one of them says, "You didn't have to come." You reply, "That's why I did." And now, back in your chambers, rereading that old decree, you smile. Because you understand something you didn't back then. It's not about planting knowledge. It's about tending it, protecting it, watering it with your absence so it reaches for the sun on its own. You roll the manuscript back up. Place it in your personal archive, not the official one. The one where you keep the things that still teach you something. You pour a cup of hibiscus tea, sit in your sun-warmed chair, and whisper to yourself, not as emperor, not as icon, not even as story, just as a man, proud and almost forgotten. They're doing it, even without me, especially without me. Good. There's a new sound in the palace. It's not drums or chants or courtly murmurs. It's lighter, stranger. It's laughter, children's laughter. Your great-grandchildren have arrived for the rainy season, all squishy cheeks, tangled hair, and enough energy to power 10 caravans. They arrive in a swirl of clay footprints and mango juice, shouting greetings, arguments, and complicated explanations of imaginary games with rules that change mid-sentence. You adore them immediately. They run through your halls like they own the place, which, in a way, they might someday. But for now, they mostly own your heart. One of them climbs onto your lap, uninvited, and asks, "Were you really the richest man in the world?" You blink, consider, then say, "Some people say that." She squints at you. "Are you still?" You smile, shake your head. "No, but I'm the happiest man in this chair." She nods solemnly, then asks for a story. You tell her about your first trip to Gao, how a donkey ate your map, how you navigated the last mile by asking goats for directions. She howls with laughter. The others pile in. Soon, you're surrounded, knee-deep in giggles and blanket forts and a puppet named Musa that looks suspiciously like a gourd in a robe. And just like that, you understand something deeply, with clarity that comes not from books, but from legacy made flesh. This is why you did it. Not the gold, not the buildings, not even the books, but this. The next generation, comfortable enough to laugh on the floor of an empire. Later, when the children nap in a tangled, snoring heap, you write a note to your successor. Leave room for noise. Greatness doesn't always arrive on horseback. Sometimes it toddles in, covered in jam. You keep that letter unsealed. You want him to read it whenever he needs it. You find yourself watching the little ones more than you speak now. One draws maps. One lines up cups and insists she's organizing a trade empire. Please don't touch. Another has started trying to teach the chickens to read. You hope it works. You spend hours just being near them, because they ask the kind of questions you used to ask, before advisors, before treasury reports, before titles wrapped themselves around your name like vines. Why does the moon change shape? Do trees remember who watered them? Can you eat gold? You tell them, because it's shy. Only the old ones. Only once, and I don't recommend it. They think you're hilarious. You hope, more than anything, that they grow up in a Mali that still listens to those kinds of questions. A Mali that values wonder as much as wealth. You begin writing stories for them, little fables, silly rhymes, tales with camels who get lost on purpose, and stars who fall in love with puddles. You write them in plain language. No flourishes, no grand openings. Just truth wrapped in delight. One day, your eldest great-grandson reads one aloud to the others. You listen from behind a curtain, unseen. He pauses at the end and says, "That one's my favorite. It sounds like grandfather." Your heart breaks a little, then swells, because even as you step further into history, you're still here, in laughter, in stories, in questions you may never answer, but that matter all the same. You rise, stretch, and leave them to their dreams. Outside, the rain begins again, soft and rhythmic. You whisper to the sky, not in prayer, but in thanks, because you're no longer the richest. You're just the root. And what grows from you will shade the world. You awaken to the scent of ink, not fresh ink, not that sharp, vinegary burst that clings to new manuscripts. This is older, faded, the smell of pages that have been loved. Someone has brought the palace library into bloom again. You walk the halls, slowly, reverently. Scrolls, codices, folios, arranged not just by topic, but by temperament. Someone's idea. A young librarian with a moon-shaped scar on his chin and a tendency to sing while alphabetizing. He's reorganized the archive into moods. Books to calm. Books to awaken. Books to ask impossible questions. Book to help you sleep. You try one from the Gentle Disagreement shelf. It's a treatise arguing that time is actually a stubborn illusion invented by tired farmers. You disagree, respectfully. You also order a copy for every provincial school. You've always believed that books are more than memory. They are movement. And here, in this quiet, papery corridor, you feel that movement all around you. You stop at a reading bench. An elder man sits with his grandson on his lap, slowly tracing the lettergars of a poem across a page, not reading aloud, just following. You don't interrupt, because this is the kind of ruling you now do best. Silent witnessing. You've become less like the sun, and more like a shadow that nurtures. Your role now is to protect the light, not generate it. And light, these days, is everywhere. In the classrooms, in the markets, in the chatter of scholars who now disagree with your earliest policies and aren't punished for it. In the laughter of a girl who just discovered that she loves geometry because it reminds her of braiding hair. You linger by the legal section. Your earliest decrees still stand. But beside them now are pages and pages of interpretations, revisions, annotations written in increasingly modern script. Some changes you didn't authorize. You allow them anyway. Because law, like leadership, should evolve. One note catches your eye. A footnote on a water rights decree, amended by a young scribe with handwriting like a wandering lizard. He's added a single line. Rivers change, so should we. You make a mental note to promote him, or at least send him a better pen. You step outside. The afternoon is warm. The sun dapples the walkway through the library garden. A new grove of baobab trees has been planted there, short and hopeful. There's a bench nearby. On it sits a copy of your own biography, The One Who Walked to Mecca. You didn't write it, of course. You never would. But someone did. And now it lives here, shelved beside poets and philosophers. You flip through it. It's mostly accurate, though you're taller in the drawings, and there's an entire chapter on how your beard had its own gravity. You consider disputing it, but your beard has pulled in a few mango slices over the years. You laugh, leave the book on the bench. As you walk away, You hear two children arguing over who gets to read it next. You don't turn around. You just smile. Because this is it, isn't it? Legacy, not as a statue, not as a sealed tomb or immortal proclamation, but as a page passed forward. You reach the edge of the courtyard. A breeze tugs at your robe. A bird sings something that sounds suspiciously like a proverb. The ink smell follows you like perfume. And in that moment, you know, you don't need to write more laws. You don't need to build more walls. You've written your empire in paper, in people, in a library that grows without permission and without end. You've taken to walking at dawn now, not for exercise, not for show, for clarity. Before the cooks start cooking, before the scribes uncap their ink, before anyone remembers to ask you anything, you drift through the palace like a soft rumor, past the prayer hall, still fragrant with sleep and incense, past the kitchens, where a pot of something gently simmers without needing supervision, past the herb gardens, where the basil seems to grow just to impress the mint. It's the time of day when your thoughts speak softly enough to be heard. You reach the outer walls and climb the stairs to the observation post, a quiet place built originally to watch for approaching messengers, now mostly used by lovers and daydreamers. From here, the empire stretches before you, not in dramatic peaks or flashy skylines, in rooftops, in laundry lines, in early morning marketplaces that buzz like waking hives. And in that stillness, something lands lightly in your chest. Peace. Not because everything is perfect, not because there are no problems, but because you've left behind enough wisdom to meet them. You've built systems, not just shrines. Encouraged debate, not just obedience. Made room for questions no one could answer yet. And more importantly, you've stepped back far enough for others to step forward. Your successor now holds court regularly. You've watched him settle into the rhythm, uncertain at first, then more fluid. He started quoting poetry. That was when you knew he'd be fine. He still comes to you for advice, but now he brings it with his own opinions. You encourage him, correct gently, challenge more often with a raised eyebrow than a raised voice. The other day, he told you about a new salt tax policy. You asked, will it be remembered as helpful or clever? He smiled. Hopefully both. You nodded. Then leave room for feedback, even from someone who smells like fish. That became a proverb by lunch. You chuckle now, watching the sun rise over the courtyards where children are beginning their morning lessons. You see the city learning itself every day, and you feel deeply and calmly that your work is done, not finished, not abandoned, but passed on. There's a word in your language, Sophia, that doesn't translate cleanly. Some say it means dignity. Others, grace after action. You think it means knowing when to stop speaking and start listening again. So you do. You spend your days writing letters, not for state matters, for memory. You pen long reflections addressed to no one in particular. Notes about gardens, about shoes, about the color of light on mud brick at sunset, about the quiet power of letting a child win a game now and then. Your scribes don't archive them. You don't want them to. You leave them in drawers. Tuck them in scroll cases. Slide them into books at random. You want someone to stumble across them later, when they need them most. You even write one titled, "How to Be a Good Ancestor." It's short. Tell the truth. Plant things. Laugh with children. Read more than you talk. Leave the world softer than you found it. You leave that one beneath your pillow. Each day now feels like closure, wrapped in calm. Your people walk with confidence. Your libraries hum. Your fields ripple with new crops, new rhythms, new songs. And you are the echo, no longer the shout. The blueprint, not the builder. The whisper that says, "Go on, you're ready." There's a bench beneath the oldest tree in the palace garden. Its bark thick and twisted. Its roots deep enough to hum if you press your ear to the ground. You sit there most evenings now, not for ceremony, for surrender. It's not a sad surrender, not defeat, not some dramatic unraveling, like those tales where kings toss crowns into rivers. It's a letting go, shaped like a sigh, because you feel it now, in your knees, your breath, your dreams. The final approach. You've done what needed doing, and more. So now you let yourself sit, and remember, and allow the empire to move without your hand on its spine. People still greet you with reverence, but their eyes drift toward your successor now. You're not offended. You're relieved. They ask your opinion less often. You give it less often. Not out of bitterness, but out of faith. Faith in the systems you've built, the minds you've nurtured, the future you've seeded, like millet across 1,000 hills. You spend hours under this tree, sometimes alone, sometimes with visitors, old friends, loyal servants, curious children. One boy sits beside you and asks, "What's the last thing you'll do?" You smile. "I don't know yet." He nods solemnly, as if he's just been told a prophecy. You write more, but not decrees, just thoughts, fables, gratitudes. You list the names of everyone you remember who helped build this reign. Some are famous, some forgotten. All of them mattered. You write small blessings for strangers who'll never know your name. You begin crafting your final prayer, not to be read aloud in a mosque, but to be whispered into the earth when your feet leave it. Let those who follow me plant more than I did. Forgive the roots I stepped on. Guide the branches I could not reach. Let the fruit taste sweeter for having been shared. You dream more now, sometimes of Mecca, sometimes of rain. Once of a palace made entirely of paper, with scholars for walls and lullabies for doors. You wake smiling. Your body is slower, softer. You walk less. You listen more. You sit in the garden and let the empire pass by. Merchants haggling in 4 languages. A camel chewing quietly beneath a fig tree. Scholars debating beside the fish pond. Children laughing down the corridors, chased by a servant who's clearly lost the thread of discipline and surrendered to joy. And through it all, you breathe. You've learned that real legacy isn't loud. It's not even visible most of the time. It's a seed, a rhythm, a silence that holds a city together. Your great-granddaughter brings you tea. She kisses your forehead, asks no questions, just sits. She is the empire now. She, and those like her. And the bench beneath you, it creaks, but it holds. Like you, like Molly. The morning arrives without fanfare. No parades, no choirs, no royal announcements echoing from the minarets. Just soft light through your window, dust motes drifting lazily, and the sound of sandals scuffing along the garden path outside. You are awake, and you are ready. Today is the day you begin stepping back completely. Not with speeches, not with crowns handed over, or banners lowered, but with presence withdrawn, like the tide, leaving behind shells and seaweed, and a smooth, rippled shore. You eat your breakfast slowly, millet porridge, warm dates, a small slice of mango. You finish your tea before it cools. You smile at the servant who brings it without a word, because she's known you since before the walls had windows. You dress plainly. A soft robe, no jewelry. You leave your sandals by the door. Then, barefoot, you walk once more through the palace. Not to inspect, to say goodbye, quietly, privately. You pass the music hall, where a new student practices scales on a 2-stringed lute. It's slightly out of tune. You grin. That's how all good beginnings sound. You pass the throne room. You don't enter. You pass the audience courtyard, where a young official is nervously preparing to hear petitions for the first time. You nod at him as you pass. He forgets to bow. You hope he always forgets when he's focused on listening. You reach the archives. You run your hand along the shelves, the spines, the work of thousands of hands. Each book a candle, each scroll a heartbeat you'll never meet. You leave a single note tucked inside the oldest manuscript. This was never about gold. It was about making memory useful. Then you return to the garden, to the bench beneath the old tree. Your successor joins you there. You don't offer advice. You offer a story, a short one, about a boy who once planted a mango pit, watered it daily, sang to it when no one was looking, and never saw it fruit before he left. Your successor listens. Then, slowly, he nods. That's all you need. The children arrive next. They sit on the grass, too wiggly for reverence, too young for grief. One brings you a drawing, a son with arms and feet and a huge beard. She tells you it's the Mansa of light. You chuckle and say, "He looks wise." You keep the drawing. You close your eyes. The sun warms your face. The wind smells like shea and rain. Somewhere in the city, drums begin to play. Not for you, for a wedding, for a market, for a regular Tuesday. Perfect. Because the empire no longer waits on your breath. It breathes on its own. And so, at last, you lean back. Let go. Feel the weight you carried for so long dissolve like sugar in tea. No regrets, no fear. Only this: a single truth that rises gently through your chest like the tide returning. You were never the gold. You were the giver, and that was always enough. So now, as the moon begins its slow climb over the quiet skyline of a sleeping Mali, and the last of the mango trees rustle in the night breeze, you can feel the story settling. Not ending, just easing into quiet. The city hushes. The courtyards go still. The last sandals shuffle away down corridors you once built. And the empire, like you, finally rests. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts drift, not into facts or date, but into impressions. The feel of warm earth beneath your feet, the smell of ink drying on parchment, the gentle sound of distant drums echoing down a long, golden corridor of time. You've walked through wars and peace, built roads and libraries, changed maps and hearts. And now is the soft chapter, where nothing needs doing, where everything has already been done. Let the gold go. Let the weight go. Let the story fold itself up like a blanket after a long day, still warm from the sun, still sweet with the laughter of those you led. You are Musa. You are memory. You are a footstep in soft sand, leading others forward. So sleep now, with the calm of someone who served well, with the peace of someone who planted joy. And if you dream, let it be of rain falling gently on a school courtyard, and a child beneath a mango tree, reading a book you made possible. End of script. Sweet dreams.